adventures, starting with American TV series. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 101 The Science Articus Strength. How is it going? It's nice here, isn't it? Locke said to Mike at the address the farm had chosen for the training center and dormitories. This is indeed a great place for a security company training center, Mike said, looking at the surveyors busy on the lawn. The farm has a great environment, and that manor too. Susan absolutely loves it and is even planning her wedding there. It's perfect that she likes it. The manor's servants will be able to help with the wedding, Locke said with a smile. That manor was the reason I decided to buy it. I actually owed the bank a lot of money to buy it. Ha ha ha. Do rich people also owe money? Mike laughed. The richer people are, the more they like to borrow money for investment, Locke shrugged. For the next while, you'll have to look after the work here and help Susan prepare for the wedding. You'll be busy. Being busy is a good thing. I'd get worried if no one called me, Mike said. Speaking of which, why did you suddenly want to start a security company? Rich people are always afraid of death. I trust people I choose myself more than hiring bodyguards. Locke smiled and said, Are you planning to invite Zach to your wedding? After Susan and I got engaged, I went to see him and told him about the wedding, Mike said. He's very busy now. He has several professional teachers around him, and his grandfather is always watching him, taking care of all the company matters. It's really tiring. You have to be understanding. After all, he doesn't have much time left. I want Zach to learn as much as possible during this time. I just want Zach to be happier. After all, you know, the truth has hit him hard. I heard from Zach that after Paul Young was imprisoned, he went to see him and they had a big argument. Mike's face was filled with worry. He was his own son, after all. Even though he hadn't known about Zach's existence, he still hoped for his well-being. Don't worry. After all, what he's going through right now is something many people wouldn't even be able to hope for, Locke reassured Mike. It's just that taking on such a huge business all of a sudden takes time to adjust. You're right, Mike nodded. When we get a chance to meet, I hope you can help him. You know a lot more about this than I do. The last time I saw Zach, he said Grandpa always mentioned you to him, saying you, too, had suddenly inherited a huge fortune and then achieved amazing results. There will be opportunities later. Locke patted Mike's shoulder. That's all for today. You'll officially start your work tomorrow. I've had the chef prepare a dinner to welcome you. Haha, I can't miss it then. Any good wine? Plenty of good wine. A few days later, when Locke and Peggy entered the classroom, they noticed that many of the students were pointing and commenting on little Sheldon, who was sitting in the front row. PFFD. When she got closer and saw little Sheldon's face, Peggy couldn't help but burst out laughing. Little Sheldon's expressionless face was highlighted by a single black eye. What's wrong with you? Peggy asked after she had finished laughing. Glancing at Locke, who also had a smile on his face, she said reluctantly, I want to embody the spirit of Batman and help Leonard deal with the villains that plague him. Although little Sheldon and Leonard disliked each other, after spending time together, two children of similar ages could still become friends. This was their fate. Even if they wouldn't admit it. You want to be Batman? Peggy looked at little Sheldon. Why can't I be Batman? Little Sheldon retorted, then stared at her and said in a deep voice, I am Batman, and this is what happens when Batman does good deeds. Peggy smiled and gestured at little Sheldon's black eye. Little Sheldon glared at Peggy and didn't want to continue talking. Peggy turned to Locke and asked, Do you think Sheldon resembles Batman? He can't be Batman. The only thing he resembles is a psychopath. Batman isn't a psychopath, little Sheldon exclaimed. Neither am I. My mom took the test. Bruce Wayne is the capitalist who monopolizes Gotham. With the resources and influence he controls, he could fundamentally change the city if he wanted to, Locke analyzed, but he doesn't do that. Instead, he transforms into Batman to fight criminals, even promoting a no-kill theory. He sends criminals to prisons or mental hospitals for further training, and these criminals become increasingly skilled and perverted. Upon release, they bring even more suffering to the people of Gotham. With his intelligence, it's impossible for him not to realize this, or perhaps he subconsciously ignores it, enjoying the luxuries of the rich during the day and pursuing a dark life of excitement at night. He's no different from those psychopaths who have the money but also the thrill, possessing a dual personality, except his money is immense, in comparison, I still prefer Iron Man. At least after his awakening, he truly put his ideals into practice, even shutting down Stark Industries' most important weapons division. These words left Sheldon speechless. His face began to twitch, and the corners of his eyes spasmed. Some things really don't stand up to scrutiny. They're truly terrifying when you think about them. It's no big deal. Seeing that Sheldon was about to lose his composure, Locke said, "There's only a fine line between genius and madness. Since he is a genius, it's normal to be a little weird in the eyes of others. I'm not crazy." Noticing Locke's eyes, little Sheldon emphasized loudly again, "My mother took me for the test." Okay, Locke also knew that he couldn't go too far, otherwise when little Sheldon had a diabetic attack, the principal would ask him to mediate again. It's good that you practice the concept of superheroes helping others, but you should do it within your ability. Do it within your ability? Who said I was going to compete with those guys in strength? Little Sheldon said while looking at Locke with envy. Do I look like a muscular man like you? I'm going to talk to him. This reminded Locke of the Big Bang Theory. When Penny first moved across the street, in order to perform well in front of the goddess, Leonard promised Penny to help him get the TV back from his ex-boyfriend. Two people with a combined IQ of 360 were stuck at the electronic door control downstairs, completely lost. Finally, a pair of elementary school girls swiped the door open with a method neither of them could have imagined. They hurried in and knocked at the door. Leonard said, "I'll handle the conversation," while Sheldon offered to be the muscle. Sheldon, even a chicken, could chase after a 6-year-old girl, and even a guy who was scared and fled injured was still the muscle. This really shows the strength of the science geek. Chapter 102 Bachelor Party Invitation. It seems I have to find a chance to go to Leonard's school. Locke said this while walking on the road after a class. Are you going to help Leonard? Peggy looked at Locke. It seems that when you were in high school, you had the habit of protecting your younger brothers, just like Lip. Lip is not my younger brother, he is my friend and teammate in the mathematical Olympiad team, Locke emphasized. I just hope Leonard will not be inexplicably disturbed at school. Okay, Peggy shrugged her shoulders, and showed an interested look again. Can I come with you? I heard that you taught the entire football team a lesson in high school. I haven't seen it yet. If you want to follow, just follow. Locke did not stop, but tomorrow is the weekend, and there will be no classes. We can only wait until next week. Hi, Locke. The two were walking when Elizabeth Plimpton came over. It's great to see you. Our sisterhood is having a party tonight. Do you want to come? Sorry, I have something to do after school this afternoon, so I can't go. Locke thought for a while and refused. The future female doctor was very knowledgeable, but he had made an appointment with Damon and his daughter to deal with Damek together. This was a big job. Really don't have time. Elizabeth moved closer to Locke, took his hand, and rubbed her body against him gently. We are all alumni, and we all admire your talent. We all want to see the school's #1 genius. But I have issued a military order. I must invite you over. Don't embarrass me, okay? The faint fragrance wafted, coupled with his soft touch. Locke couldn't help but recall the afternoon when he was the administrator in Elizabeth's dormitory. The girl next to him really knew a lot. But he still shook his head. I do have important business to attend to in New York. Maybe next time. Seeing Locke's firm tone, the physics doctor who loved to play the role of a role model felt a little disappointed, but she quickly added, you said you were going to New York this weekend. Yes, then are you free tomorrow night? What's going on? Senior Catherine is getting married soon, and we're planning a bachelorette party for her. Would you like to come? I can see my bridesmaid dresses and Catherine's wedding gown in advance. Ahem. Locke paused, then said, it's not appropriate for a boy like me to attend your girl's bachelorette party. It's okay. The insightful future physics doctor smiled. They actually want to meet you, too. We're all friends. You can be our special guest in that case. Excuse me, Locke agreed. He didn't care much about wedding dresses and bridesmaid costumes, but he couldn't refuse invitations from enthusiastic classmates one after another. After all, maintaining good relationships with classmates was important. Okay, I'll text you the time and location later, Elizabeth said, kissing Locke on the cheek before turning and leaving. See you then. At 8 o'clock that evening, Locke stood atop a Manhattan high-rise, gazing across at another tower, the headquarters of Frank DeMico, New York's largest trafficker. It was this tycoon who had murdered Damon's wife, leading to his years in prison. After his release, Damon resolved to train Mindy and form a father-daughter partnership for revenge. Daredevil, we're in position, Damon's voice echoed from the other end of the communicator. "Yes," Locke said slowly. "I just rechecked the building. The next operation will proceed as agreed." "No problem," Damon said with a hint of impatience. "Also, Frank DeMico must be left to me, of course. As agreed, I want 70% of the proceeds from this operation." "Okay," Damon agreed without hesitation. He wasn't out to eliminate the traffickers for the money, and Daredevil was more powerful than both father and daughter combined, so he naturally wanted the lion's share. "Let's wait for news from there," Locke said. About 10 minutes later, a sudden explosion erupted in a building to the south, accompanied by a massive fire that stood out against the darkness. Quickly, the personnel inside the building in front of them began to move, with cars pulling out of the building's basement garage and heading straight for the fire. These were bombs and incendiary bombs Locke had planted long ago, with timers programmed to trigger when the timer expired, wiping out the people and goods inside. Over there was a crucial warehouse belonging to Frank Demick. With this sudden incident, Demick's crew would undoubtedly dispatch personnel to investigate and respond. This was a pre-planned measure, designed to reduce the number of personnel within the building in front of them. Of course, it wasn't a concern that too many people would be too much to handle, but rather to avoid wasting time cleaning up the situation, giving Frank Demick time to escape should he realize something was amiss. After all, big-time traders like these are usually extremely cautious, and having one or two quick escape routes is standard practice. If Demick escaped this time, given his cautious nature, recapture would be even more difficult, so it was best to proceed with caution. Watching over a dozen cars quickly leave the building and head for the warehouse, Locke contacted Damon and his daughter. "Start the countdown now. In 10 seconds, Mindy and I will launch a frontal assault. Damon, you provide remote assistance. Also, keep an eye on the helicopter on the rooftop. Don't let him escape from there." "No problem," Damon quickly agreed. After giving his instructions, Locke jumped off the rooftop, slid down quickly using a rope, and landed lightly on the ground, heading straight for the building's main entrance. Through the glass, he spotted two guards smoking inside. The members of the drug trafficking gang were certainly not like well-trained soldiers, and they wouldn't stand guard in a disciplined manner. They were lucky enough not to be running around. The two men huddled together, puffing away, chatting about the recent warehouse incident and how their monthly pay would be short again. They didn't notice Locke's rapid approach. Bang! The next moment, the tempered glass door shattered, and a figure flashed by. Bang! 3 gunshots rang out, leaving holes in the foreheads of the two men. The next moment, Locke shifted his gun, firing left and right. The combined sounds of 2 pistols combined to create a triple volley. The other guards, lazing on the lounge sofas drinking, were too slow to react and were similarly struck in the head, their bottles dropping to the ground. The 6 guards guarding the entrance hall were killed in the blink of an eye, while Locke casually tucked his pistols back into his waistband. Just then, Mindy ran in and joined Locke at the elevator, blocking the partially open door. Locke then smashed through the elevator's air vents and leaped aboard. He then brought Mindy up and handed her an automated rope climbing device. According to intelligence, Demick's office was on a high floor, and the two couldn't run up one floor at a time, so they needed a more efficient method. Using the rope climbing device, they soared up the elevator shaft, reaching the 27th floor. They drew their daggers and accurately stabbed the elevator door, plunging it open. They descended one after another. The series of actions were smooth and flowing. Before the traffickers in the building received any news from the gate, the two men had already entered. Chapter 103 Violent Mindy. Mindy landed first inside the building, immediately spotting the gunmen guarding it. Turning at the noise, they saw Mindy suddenly appear, shouting and reaching for their weapons at their waists. Locke, who hadn't even touched the ground yet, waved his hands, and 2 guns appeared in his hands. Bang! 2 more simultaneous gunshots rang out, silencing the 4 nearest gunmen. Locke himself landed, quickly moving, and instantly hid behind a pillar, leisurely observing the situation. Meanwhile, Mindy pulled out a custom pistol, specially modified by Locke for her, requiring less force to pull the trigger and more suited to her use. She pointed the gun at the approaching gunmen and pulled the trigger, sending them screaming and falling to the ground. Her accuracy was inferior to Locke's, and each gunman was struck multiple times, their bodies riddled with bloody wounds. Several of them still had their eyes open, their mouths open in silent moans, a gruesome sight. After the shooting ended, Mindy hid behind another pillar several meters away, splitting up from Locke and reloading magazines. Hearing the roar of gunmen moving rapidly toward them, Locke appeared relaxed, unlike the serious little girl. There were only 100 gunmen in the building, and they weren't very strong. If he really went all out, he'd be out in no time. But this was Damon and his daughter's revenge, and he was more concerned with cooperating with them, ensuring the smooth operation and allowing them to fulfill their long-cherished wish. The accumulated emotions of Damon and his daughter's blood feud could be vented in this fight. For Locke, it was just a warm-up game, along with a mission reward. Furthermore, the funds accumulated by Damon over the years would help to further enrich the accounts of his overseas company. Bang, 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 the traffickers reacted quickly. In a matter of moments, 8 gunmen arrived, hiding behind sofas and tables and chairs, and opened fire on the 2 men. Here they come, alerting Minty to pay attention. Locke emerged from behind a pillar, moving quickly and firing at the gunmen. Bang, bang, bang. Locke's marksmanship was even more accurate, firing 3 shots from both pistols simultaneously. The 6 gangsters fell silently before they could react. Mindy was equally swift, her small body tumbling, leaping from behind a pillar. She unleashed a barrage of fire from both pistols, hitting the 2 gunmen closest to her. She then aimed her rifles at the nearby passageway, aiming at 2 reinforcements who had arrived, and pulled the trigger again. Bang, bang, the 2 advancing gunmen, only seeing a fleeting figure, were killed in the hallway before they could react. Ignoring Mindy, Locke swiftly ran through the rooms on the floor, firing a series of shots at doorways, instantly wiping out a gunman who had been hiding behind them, attempting a sneak attack. To Locke, with his magical senses, these gunmen stood out like bright lights in the darkness. A sneak attack? That was sheer overthinking. Having dealt with the enemies on this floor, Locke and Mindy reloaded their magazines and headed towards the stairwell. There's probably a lot of them, Mindy smiled, listening to the clatter of footsteps on the stairs. Should we use a smoke bomb? No need, Locke shook his head. The smoke will also affect our vision. Let's just deal with it directly. As he spoke, Locke entered the stairwell first and immediately spotted the 7 or 8 gunmen rushing towards him. He charged again. Bang! The 2 gunmen in front, raising their guns and about to fire, were instantly shot in the head. Locke didn't stop, swinging his arms, and several bullets arced. The gunmen behind him, before they could even see him, paused, and, using the momentum of their forward rush, fell to the bottom of the stairs. The remaining gunmen, startled, fired wildly. Puff puff puff, bullets flew everywhere, scraping a layer of white dust off the wall, but none of them reached Locke. Bang puff puff, Locke fired his 2 guns with unerring accuracy, cutting down the remaining gunmen one by one like harvesting wheat. Mindy's eyes lit up at Locke's graceful movements. His marksmanship was truly accurate and impressive. The little figure got excited and rushed to the front, quickly reaching the 28th floor. As soon as he emerged, he heard several gunshots. These were the shots fired by several gunmen who were left behind and were scared to death. But their own accuracy was not good. When they saw the figure flashing, they subconsciously fired, and the bullets flew away without knowing where. Relying on the armor on her body, Mindy's little figure turned and moved, firing dense bullets from the 2 guns in her hands. But after a while, the gunshots stopped, and the remaining 5 gunmen were all shot into sieves, with blood all over their bodies. Locke followed behind and watched Mindy's performance, thinking that this little lolly was really violent. After so many years of training by Damon, Mindy had become accustomed to this kind of exciting life, and it would be difficult for her to return to peace in the future. Hurry, don't waste time. The enemy has reached the 28th floor, shouts and footsteps soon echoed from the stairs overhead. They're tough to deal with. Those holding blast shields, hold the front, and those behind follow. After all, they were big-time New York dealers, well-equipped with weapons and equipment. The Demick gang naturally possessed a variety of specialized equipment, including blast shields and other police-grade offensive gear. In other words, they couldn't cause too much noise in downtown New York, or else RPGs would have been brought out. With this setup, Mindy would be a tough sell, but Locke. Bang! He swung his arm casually, seemingly without aim. The gunman in front, holding the blast shield, had a bloody wound on his right foot. With a scream, he fell, tumbling down the stairs. He was shot in the head by Locke, his scream muffled. The gunman following the blast shield man hadn't reacted yet, and continued to descend the stairs by inertia. Bang, bang, bang. The next moment, with a sound of several gunshots, the 4 gunmen who were advancing faster were shot in the head one by one, and then tumbled down the stairs. The gunmen leaning back on the upper floors suddenly stopped in their tracks, sweat on their foreheads, and no longer had the idea of rushing down. The fat leader, standing behind them, had no idea what was happening. Seeing the men stop, he shouted, "Why did you stop? Charge!" The gunman frantically cursed the fat leader's mother, explaining, "Dam was killed. Tommy and the others following behind were also killed because they had no cover." "How is that possible?" the fat leader exclaimed. "Dam was holding a professional blast shield. Even ordinary rifles can't penetrate it. He's no show-off." These gang members might bully ordinary people, but when faced with real danger, they lacked the courage to fight to the death. One of the terrified men retreated, shouting, "That guy down there is amazing. His shooting is incredible. He kills them with one shot." Even Dem, who was holding a shield, was taken out in two. Seeing the fat leader was about to continue, everyone quickly echoed, "Tommy and the others died horribly. I can see their bodies lying around the corner. They were all shot in the head. The guy down there is a sharpshooter." Locke listened to the commotion from above, his mind racing with thoughts. Mindy was still on the 28th floor, clearing out the remaining gunmen. This little girl had become hot girl, and her natural talent was incredible. Otherwise, Damon wouldn't have been able to reach her current level with all his training. According to Locke's observations, her nerve reaction speed was exceptional, and her movements were agile and nimble. If trained well, she could become a top elite in the future. The key was that, due to Damon's training from a young age, Mindy had become a violent little girl, and it was impossible for her to return to the life of an ordinary little girl. It was like the sequel to Kick-Ass, where Mindy still didn't give up training and taught those gang members a lesson, precisely because she had been misled by Damon and turned into a violent person. If she trained well in the future, and spent a few years training her well, she would have a trustworthy helper. Chapter 104. You come on. The fat leader, bombarded with verbal abuse from his men, finally realized the sheer strength of the enemy downstairs, and immediately lost his nerve. Following Damek, he was considered a close confidant, and he was well informed, having seen some incredibly capable elite assassins. The guy downstairs had dispatched 5 of his men in the blink of an eye, even with a blast shield clearing the way. If they didn't employ some tactics against such an elite, all of them would be nothing more than a serving of meat. At this point, disregarding the consequences, the fat leader turned to a nearby Latino youth and said, "I remember you like to carry grenades. Here." The Latino youth unhesitatingly pulled out a grenade and handed it to the fat leader. The surrounding gang members were startled by the sight, cursing and unconsciously retreating. One man's voice rose loudest, "Didn't I tell you long ago not to bring these dangerous men with you? This is New York, not Mexico. Do you want to call in the FBI's elite forces?" The gunmen in the building were of low quality, just ordinary gang members, which was Damek's frustration. Damek had indeed trained a few elite operatives over the years, but their number wasn't large, only about 50, as maintaining them was expensive. Locke had previously killed over 30 in his battle with Mr. X at the abandoned factory. Later, when other gangs learned of Damek's heavy losses in core forces, they rushed to replace him, forcing him to send his men away, and the resulting losses were almost complete. Damek was now in a desperate state. Even if Locke and his men didn't intervene this time, over time, other gangs would have taken over much of his territory, or even completely eliminated him. The fat leader hadn't risen to power on the strength of his combat prowess. Looking at the grenade in the Latino's hand, he chose not to fire himself but instead ordered, "Just throw it down. If it kills that guy, great. If not, all of you charge down and finish him off." His men glared at him again. "Charge for me? Is that the same as me leading the charge? Why did so many nationalist troops revolt?" The fat leader clearly didn't understand Eastern history. But he'd risen to the top by simply reading people's signals. Seeing his men about to revolt, he hesitated for a moment, then gritted his teeth and said, "I'll join you." This finally comforted the others. After all, the gang members were just a mob, all striving to climb the ladder, to make money comfortably and then legitimately command their men to fight for their lives. With everyone agreeing, the Latino pulled the safety pin on the grenade and carefully moved to the stairs, attempting to slip it down through the gap in the handrail. But just as he approached, a black muzzle pointed at him. Bang! With a crack of gunfire, his wrist was broken, and the grenade in his hand flew backward, landing with a clang not far from the feet of the other gunman. Holy shxt! The gunman froze for a moment, then cursed and scattered like birds and beasts, running in all directions. Boom! The grenade exploded. Although the gunmen who didn't have time to escape survived, the shockwave left them with ringing ears and dizziness. By then, Mindy had finished clearing the 28th floor and had just reached Locke's side when she heard the noise. Are these guys crazy? They're using grenades in this building, despite the fierce fighting inside the building. Everyone had tacitly agreed not to use high-impact explosives. Otherwise, not only the NYPD and the FBI, but even Homeland Security would be swarming. Locke didn't want trouble, and Demick was even more so. His territory wouldn't withstand a thorough search. Just like the textile factory incident, even on the outskirts of the city, a large number of personnel were still investigating the surrounding area, unwilling to miss a single clue. Therefore, when operating within the New York City area, everyone was relatively restrained, hesitant to use high-powered explosives easily. As they spoke, Locke and Mindy continued their movement. After the explosion subsided, they began to climb the stairs. The fat leader upstairs was indeed clever. He endured the discomfort, climbed to his feet, and ran to Demick's office. This was the only escape route now. Only by following Demick could they have a chance of retreat. The fat leader didn't think his men had any chance of defeating the enemy. Although there were still many men on the 29th floor, they were already in disarray. A quick escape was the best option. Sure enough, Locke and Mindy easily dispatched the 7 or 8 gunmen still near the stairwell without encountering any effective resistance. Meanwhile, Locke contacted Damon. Pay attention here. We're clearing the 29th floor. While you're cooperating with the sniper, don't forget to keep an eye on Demick. He's probably about to flee. Understood, Damon replied, glancing at the unfortunate man he just sniped and focusing his attention on the top floor. After speaking with Damon, Locke and Mindy stood at the stairwell and said, "There are 9 more outside." "Great, attack together, no problem," Locke said. 3, 2, 1, the countdown ended, and the 2 men rushed out of the stairwell simultaneously, one on the left and one on the right, back to back, providing cover. Bang, 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 a burst of intense gunfire and screams followed, and 8 of the 9 gunmen fell. Only the last one, who had retreated to the back, had managed to hide around a corner, never to reappear. "We missed one," Mindy said with some dissatisfaction, but Locke remained silent. Mindy certainly hadn't planned to compete with Locke's shooting skills. After all, she'd seen the gap between Locke and Mr. X that night, and she'd already known the difference. She simply felt she had a chance to take them all out. At that moment, in the innermost office of the 29th floor, hearing the sound of gunfire not far away, Demick listened with a gloomy face as the fat leader urged him, "Boss, let's go quickly. We can hold the line for now, but that won't be the case soon." Looking at his sweating men in the office, Demick's eyes flashed with a cold light. He pointed at the fat leader, then at a few men on the other side. "Take them out and hold them, huh? You want me to go?" The fat leader pointed at himself, and the other men remained silent. It had only been a short time since they received the news, and they had already been attacked. Of over 100 men, only a few remained. They truly didn't want to face the killers outside. "If you don't go, do you want me to go?" Seeing the cowardly expressions of his men, Demick's face grew even more gloomy, and he glared at the fat leader fiercely. Seeing this, the fat leader could only grit his teeth, gun raised, and said to the others, "You charge." At this point, the fat leader didn't even dare to ask to join the charge. Chapter 105. You still have not experienced enough. The fat leader wanted to send the others to their deaths first, but they weren't fools and stood still for a moment. It wasn't until the fat leader raised his gun that 2 of them shouted to the men standing at the door, "Nicola, you go first." With that, they pushed Nicola, who was closest to the office door, toward the door. The unfortunate man, looking at his companions staring at him, could only reluctantly plead, "But I only have 1 pistol, and you all have 2. The next moment, a submachine gun was handed to him. "Okay, you have 2 guns now, no problem." This was a big problem. Nicola wanted to say more, but seeing everyone staring at him with eager eyes, their guns vaguely pointed at him, he could only, with despair, raise his submachine gun and kick the office door open. Plop! Hearing the sound of gunfire outside and a figure appearing before him, he pulled the trigger without hesitation. Da-da-da-da. Nicholas's finger on the trigger never relaxed, emptying the magazine in one breath and blasting the oncoming figure like a sieve. "I hit him," Nicholas exclaimed in relief as he watched the figure fall to the ground. But the next moment, he recognized the gangster, the one who had narrowly escaped Minty's gunfire, now staring at him with a look of surprise and innocence. Clearly, his luck hadn't lasted. He had dodged Minty's bullets but not his companion's blows. How is it? Did they kill him? The others behind him continued to ask. Nicholas, not caring about the blows he had just dealt to his teammate, frantically searched for the magazine. Give it to me. Before he could finish his words, 3 shots rang out, and the unfortunate man, with 3 more holes in his body, fell face down in the office. The others were startled, afraid to show their faces, simply thrusting their guns outwards and firing casually. Seeing this, Damek knew his situation was hopeless. He stood up and headed for another staircase, preparing to reach the top floor. The fat leader hurriedly followed, only to be met with a glare from the other side. Seeing no way out, the fat leader's face hardened, his eyes darting around. Once his gaze reached the nearby weapons cabinet, he quickly said, "Boss, I need to use your collection." "Okay," Damek nodded. "I'll use the biggest one." The fat leader couldn't care less. The guys outside were so accurate, a match for their skill would be a sure death. Damek hesitated for a moment, but then he steeled himself. He kept walking, saying, "Whatever, as long as we can kill them. The most important thing now was to get out of here. Even if there were serious consequences, they could wait." This sudden appearance of the attacker was truly terrifying. Being targeted by someone like him made it hard to sleep soundly. If he could kill his men and the enemy together, that would be best. If not, he would pay the price. That damn textile factory, for some unknown reason, was wiped out. It's true that not focusing on business is the real problem. I should contact the Continental Hotel later and make sure the attackers are killed. Mindy, who had just dispatched Nicola, who had assaulted his teammates, faced a casual shooting of multiple gunmen. She ducked back into a corner and looked at Locke. "They're outnumbered. Should we just charge in?" "No need. These guys are amateurs. They'll run out of ammunition soon if they just fire randomly." Locke said this, and sure enough, the gunfire stopped moments later. Not good. Locke was about to call Mindy over, but then a thought flashed through his mind, and he sensed the situation over there through magic. His expression changed slightly. "Shit. Are they crazy?" Mindy poked her head out, surprised. Using a bazooka inside a building, the bazooka in Damek's collection was a high-end model. Not only did it shatter, but it also produced high temperatures, blinding light, and a continuous burning effect. It wasn't designed for indoor use and was usually reserved for attacking military targets. The fat boss, completely cornered, aimed his bazooka at the passageway, flipped the red safety, and, with a frenzied look on his face, he grinned and prepared to pull the trigger. He believed that if the enemy wasn't killed, they would be burned to death, or at worst blinded. Then, they could easily eliminate them. Bang! Just as he was about to press the fire button, a figure appeared before him. The next moment, a bloody hole appeared in the fat boss's head. The other gunmen, who had been hiding behind the fat boss, watched him collapse, unsure how to react, when a small figure flashed into the office. Bang! 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 After a series of gunshots, the office fell silent. Mindy watched as Locke reloaded the bazooka's safety while she changed the magazine. "Damek isn't here," Mindy said, surveying her surroundings. "He can't get far," Locke said. "We just need to follow him. Damon should have him stopped over there." Sure enough, Damon's voice soon came over the communicator. He had already stopped his arch-enemy, Damek. Seeking revenge, Damon mercilessly dispatched the last few gunmen Damek had stationed on the rooftop, then confronted Damek, his wife, and son. Damon's helmet had been lifted, and Damek immediately recognized him. He had been giving him trouble lately. "It's you. Why won't you just die?" "Because I won't be satisfied until I see you dead," Damon said, staring at Damek. The feud between the two had been going on for years, and now their hatred was at its peak. To vent his hatred, Damon knocked the gun out of Damek's hand, then threw his own and engaged the other man in a fierce fight. Locke couldn't help but sigh at the sight. "What's wrong?" Mindy glanced at Locke, puzzled by his sudden sigh in the middle of the fierce battle. "Damon, that's too reckless. He could have killed Damek with a single shot, but he chose to engage in hand-to-hand combat. What if he's caught and killed? That would be a huge loss," Locke said with a look of disappointment. "Not really." Mindy watched as the two men charged together like two red-eyed bulls, exchanging blows and kicks in a frenzied exchange. Unarmored, Damek had sustained multiple injuries, including a bruised nose and swollen eyes, after more than 10 rounds. Of course not, little girl, you're still inexperienced. Not to mention real life, even in movies, how many villains have been so complacent that they've been easily defeated by the protagonist, Locke lectured Mindy earnestly. He didn't want her to learn from Damon. In matters of life and death, it's never too cautious. Kill the enemy first, and everything else can come later. In movies, carelessness kills villains, but reality is different. Chapter 106 Little Lolly is more considerate. Damon and Damek exchanged blows, a frenzied exchange of blows and kicks. Damon, clad in armor, had the upper hand, and in a matter of moments, he had beaten Damek to pulp, while Damon himself remained unscathed. Suddenly, Damek, his face covered in blood, grinned and declared, "You think you're so impressive just because you're wearing a tortoise shell? Die?" As he spoke, Damek's arms suddenly clasped Damon's wrists tightly, his legs wrapped around his neck, and he used a classic armbar to completely pin him down. Damek had fought his way up from the bottom, and he was not only ruthless and shrewd, but also incredibly strong, mastering various martial arts techniques and having trained continuously for years. Damek was exploiting Damon's psychology. After all, he needed to vent years of pent-up anger by beating Damek mercilessly. Mindy, observing this, instinctively raised her gun and pulled the trigger. Damek was about to break Damon's arm when he was shot. With a scream, his entire body gave way, and he could no longer hold Damon. Damon seized the opportunity to break free from Damek and stood up again. He sneered at Damek, grabbed him by the neck, and pounded his fists into Damek's face. Bang, 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 7 or 8 punches followed, and Damek's face was unrecognizable, skin torn and blood gushing. Damon finally stood up, looking down at Damek who lay on the ground. "Any last words?" Cough cough cough. Damek, also a real character, coughed and spat out blood foam, but he still didn't bow his head. "You'll be buried with me soon, along with that guy and the girl with you. That girl must be your daughter, right? She'll go to hell with you." Puff. Damon stomped on Damek's mouth. "Hell only belongs to trash like you." He pulled a pistol from his waistband and pointed it at Damek's head. "Don't kill my dad." At that moment, a young man of 15 or 16 rushed over to Damon. Damon pushed him away and pulled the trigger. The next moment, a hole appeared in Damek's head, and the light in his eyes faded. "Dad," the young man cried, hugging Damek's body tightly. Damon looked at him for a moment, then walked past him. He then heard the young man roar, "I will definitely kill you." He then looked at Locke and Mindy standing by. "And you, none of you can escape. This young man seems to want to be our enemy," Locke said. "Should we help him? He's Chris Damek, Damek's son. He's never been involved in Damek's trafficking business," Damon replied. "You plan to let him go?" Locke frowned. "He saw your face. I'm not Damek. My hatred for him shouldn't affect my family," Damon said. "Really?" Locke shrugged, collected the reward for the quest to eliminate Damek's gang, and then placed magical marks on the young man and the woman next to him, preparing to return for a visit. He didn't want to wait until this idealistic young man caused trouble before dealing with it. It was better to nip the danger in the bud. "Okay, then, as planned, you guys retreat first. I'll search the office and Damek's house later," Locke thought as he continued. The three of them left the rooftop, Damon and his daughter in front, Locke behind. Just then, bang, "Looks like our second-generation black kid is getting a little impatient." Locke, a smile playing on his face, turned to Chris Damek, who held his gun. "You're brave." Bang, Locke also turned and pulled the trigger. Both guns fired simultaneously, leaving bullet holes in Chris's and his mother's foreheads. Anyone who's seen enough movies knows to root out the problem completely, so Locke wouldn't make that mistake. He simply didn't want to appear too cruel in front of Damon. He hadn't expected the young man to be so impulsive, and he immediately gave Locke a perfect excuse. Seeing this, Damon opened his mouth, but in the end, nothing was said. Not killing him was Damon's choice, but since he had dared to shoot at Daredevil, there was no reason for Daredevil not to fight back. Mindy, standing behind Damon, quietly gave Locke a thumbs up, clearly pleased with his work. "Little girls are so thoughtful indeed," Locke thought to himself, returning the gesture with a "you're welcome" gesture. A few minutes later, the Damons had left. Locke opened the safe in Damek's office. Inside, neatly stacked stacks of cash lay stacked together, revealing millions of dollars. There were also several passports belonging to Damek, each with a different identity, a ledger, several overseas bank accounts, and a bag of diamonds and gemstones. Locke wasn't interested in the passports or ledger, so he left them with the police. After putting the rest away, Locke disappeared into the building. From his office window, he could already see NYPD cars approaching. Locke had been busier than the Damons tonight. He searched Damek's home and several other hidden locations before reuniting with them at their base in the New York suburbs. Damon, his outer armor now stripped off, sat blankly in a chair in the back room, watching Mindy busily work, his thoughts etched in his mind. With his revenge secured, years of hard work finally culminating tonight, Damon felt momentarily lost. Mindy noticed something was amiss with Damon and asked with concern, "Dad, what's wrong? You don't seem happy." Because after revenge, most people feel empty and lost. "There's nothing wrong with him right now," said Locke. Seeing Daredevil, Mindy smiled and ran over, taking the large box Locke was carrying. "Why do I feel differently than Dad?" Locke pinched her cheek. "Because you were too young when your mother died. You didn't understand anything." Unlike Damon, who was lost after his revenge, Mindy didn't feel the same way. She was so young when her mother died that she had no memory of it. Damon had instilled in her the single-minded determination to take revenge on the traffickers and Damek. At this moment, the little girl was filled with the excitement of accomplishing something significant. After saying this, Locke approached Damon and asked with a smile, "Why, do you feel lost and lost after Damek's death?" "I vowed a long time ago to catch Damek. When I learned of my wife's death, I was even more determined to kill him. Now that he's finally dead, I really don't know what to do. Let me talk to Damon alone," Locke said to Mindy. Mindy nodded, leaving the two of them in the secret room while she went out to the living room to watch TV. "You're in a normal state of mind now. Do you want to hear my advice?" Locke said. Damon nodded. "Since you don't have any particular goals for the future, why not come work for me? I just founded a security company, and you could be an instructor there, saving you the skills you've honed over the years." Damon remained silent as Locke continued, "There's a huge sense of satisfaction when revenge is achieved, but it's also followed by emptiness. Now's the time to consider how to embark on a new life. You can't continue working as a trafficker buster. You need to return to normal life. Mindy is still young and has a bright future. You have to let her have her own life. You can't let Mindy continue like this. It's best to let her go to school like a normal girl. Regardless of her grades, at least she needs to understand society and learn how to communicate normally. She can't always be a social outcast who only knows how to fight and kill." After a long silence, Damon let out a long sigh and said, "You're willing to hire me, aren't you afraid that I'll know your identity? To recruit trustworthy people, you always have to take a little risk. And as long as you don't continue to argue with traffickers all the time, there's really nothing to worry about. You don't have to agree now. Give yourself a break and move on from the past. Then you can contact me and tell me your decision." Locke patted the large box he had brought with him. "We've made a pretty penny tonight, nearly $67 million. You'll have $20 million, partly in cash and part in an overseas account. I'll send you the account number and password later. With these, you don't have to worry about your future. Just choose what you enjoy and do it." Chapter 107 The groom whose funeral is scheduled. Although Damon wasn't particularly interested in money, the sudden appearance of such a pile of cash before him still left him a bit disoriented. Leaving Damon alone to ponder, Locke left the back room and entered the living room, where he saw Mindy, already dressed in a red hooded sweatshirt, sitting on the sofa watching TV. "This feels a bit like Little Red Riding Hood," Locke thought to himself. "How is it?" Mindy turned to Locke, hearing the noise. "Sure," Locke gave her an okay sign and rubbed Mindy's head. "I just talked to your dad. You should take a long vacation to relax and then prepare for your new life." "So what's Dad planning to do?" Mindy asked curiously. "I suggest he become an instructor at a security company. He's quite good at training people, after all," Locke said. "That sounds interesting. Should I become a bodyguard, too?" "I love the kind in the movies," Mindy said, gesturing. "You're still too young. You need to go to school properly, huh?" An embarrassed look crossed Mindy's face at this, a look of reluctance evident. "Don't be discouraged," Locke said with a smile. "School is just a way for you to learn how to fit in with normal life. If your father really does become a drill instructor and you get bored of school, you can always go to a security company on weekends. When you graduate, if you really want to be a bodyguard, I'll ask you to protect me. How about that? Then you'll know my true identity." "Really?" Hearing this, Mindy brightened up again and held up her pinky finger. "It's a deal." Locke smiled and made a pinky promise. "It's a deal." A moment later, Locke left, leaving the father and daughter to slowly adjust to their future. After leaving Damon and his daughter's base, Locke packed up and returned to his new apartment in New York. It was not far from Monica's apartment and was larger than their previous one. While still 2 bedrooms and a living room, it had a dressing room and storage area, and the bathroom was larger with a large bathtub. Locke had converted one of the 2 rooms into a study, and as for the larger bedroom, he'd ordered a king-size bed, big enough for 3 or 4 people to roll around in. Now that the renovation was complete, Locke had moved everything from his original apartment. This morning, he'd come to Monica's apartment to help Tang Wei with some of his most frequently used items. He planned to move the rest in a few days, finding a suitable opportunity. Since we've moved into a new place, why don't we have a small party together? Monica suggested. That's fine. The living room is quite spacious, plenty for all of us, Locke said. But don't rush it now. It'll be better to wait until Tang Wei moves in completely in a few days, then it's settled. I'll prepare the meal then, Monica announced eagerly. No problem, Locke agreed with a smile, then asked, why didn't Ross come over today? He's been so annoying these days. I told him to reflect on himself, Monica said with a hint of disdain. Ever since his reconciliation with Carol, Ross had been acting smug, especially with their increasingly frequent interactions as a couple, as if he had grasped a crown of victory. When everyone got together, Ross couldn't help but ramble on about his own charms. He argued that Susan was still just a woman, and no matter how powerful she was, could she possibly conjure up the same magical artifacts as him? His frequent boasting, his arrogant expression, and his unbridled language had drawn opposition and sniping from the girls, and he hadn't dared come to Monica's apartment for the past few days. Locke listened to Monica's continued accusations, then smiled and fell silent. Although he had caused a minor butterfly effect, allowing Ross to learn about Carol's lesbianism earlier than he would have otherwise, the inertia of the plot was not easily circumvented. After calculating the time it would take for the 2 to get back together, Locke felt that Ross's complacency wouldn't last long. That afternoon, the insightful future female doctor called Locke again to confirm his attendance at the bachelor's party. Bachelor's parties are a popular pre-wedding trend in the United States, where newlyweds and their best friends gather for an all-night revelry to bid farewell to single life. As the bride-to-be's closest friend, the well-informed female doctor naturally single-handedly organized the bachelorette party. The party took place in a single-family villa, adorned with festive decorations like streamers and balloons. It's beautifully decorated, Locke said, a bit surprised upon entering. It's nothing special, after all. It's Catherine's bachelorette party, and they've prepared everything to welcome you, Elizabeth said. Catherine is my idol. Like you, she loves literature. Senior, this is Locke Lee. Hello, Catherine Sumi. Nice to meet you. The bride-to-be, Miss Catherine, smiled and extended her hand to Locke. Welcome, I hope I didn't disturb you, Locke said, sizing up the woman, who exuded a sensual aura. It's nothing, just an ordinary bachelorette party. To have a rider from the arcane throne and the Lord of Mysteries is an honor. Catherine didn't shake Locke's hand, but quietly approached and gave him a kiss on the cheek. As their cheeks touched, warm breath blew against Locke's ear. After separating, Catherine continued, I'm also writing my first novel, and I'd love to learn from you. You're writing a novel too? What kind of thing? Locke asked casually. He felt that the woman before him exuded a special aura, and her unintentional gestures always triggered something deep in his heart. It's not fantasy, but mainly about violence, murder, and the heart, Catherine said with a smile. That's really unique. Locke's expression shifted slightly. It seemed hard to imagine a novel of this type being written by a woman. This Catherine before him must have some mental problems. I've put a lot of effort into this. I hope you enjoy the party we've carefully prepared, Catherine said with a smile. Of course, Locke said with a gentle smile. Since it's so carefully planned, I have to attend. The bride-to-be, Catherine Sumi, added a touch of mystery to this legendary bridal class's ultimate bachelorette party. Locke believed that every man would want to attend. But at this moment, he felt a flicker of regret. The sight of Catherine Sumi finally reminded him of a movie he'd reminisced about many times in his past life. The film that had once enlightened him might not have been as visually rich as those he'd seen in his teacher's films, but its charm lingered in his memory. But facing this heroine in person would inevitably fill him with a sense of dread, even greater than the fear evoked by Magical Amy. After all, Magical Amy was just a betrayed boyfriend, while this woman, seeking excitement and inspiration for her writing. Had actively pursued countless boyfriends and husbands. Thinking of this, tomorrow's groom truly felt quite pitiful. He never knew when he would meet his end, and perhaps it was time to schedule a funeral. Chapter 108. The gift has been delivered. Sensing something amiss with Catherine Sumi, Locke's mind immediately conjured up fierce phrases like single-handedly meeting, rushing straight in, 7 ins and outs, bloodshed like a river, and flooding 7 armies. Then, he decided, as long as she wasn't targeting him, it wasn't a big deal. Perhaps it wouldn't be a bad idea to just forget about each other after one night. He'd better be cautious. If he sensed she had other intentions, he could still try to prove her point. Oh, man. Soon, with a future most understanding female doctor holding his arm and leading the way, Locke was surrounded by a group of women. Soon, after everyone had eaten and drunk their fill, under the pink lights of the villa, they changed into their prepared attire. The group of friends, dressed in various bridesmaid dresses, and Catherine, in her white wedding dress, gathered together to play the classic game of flying chess. There were also other games, like the heart-opening truth or dare game, and the customizable king's game. Standing on the podium at the Nobel Prize ceremony, Dr. Elizabeth surveyed the crowd. She was the center of attention, a moment that would be remembered in history alongside those pioneering scientists. She stepped to the microphone and began to speak, but for some reason, her chest felt unusually heavy, as if something inexplicably squeezing her, choking her breath. She struggled, but couldn't shake it off. What was going on? Why wasn't I allowed to speak? I'm a Nobel laureate. Is someone jealous of me? Finally, she felt a buzzing in her head, and as she slowly opened her eyes, everything vanished, leaving only a throbbing pain in her head. She knew it was a hangover. Elizabeth reached up to touch her head, but she bumped against something, and heard a gurgling sound. Turning her head, she saw a wine bottle rolling along the carpet and against the wall. Then she saw more bottles, and then she felt something heavy on her chest. She tried to see who it was, but the person's long, tangled blonde hair obscured their face, leaving only a slender waist and long legs. But soon, judging by the shattered wedding dress, Elizabeth knew it was Catherine Sumi. Thinking of this, she swayed slightly, and saw more people, all familiar, members of Catherine's group who had attended the bachelorette party with her, now unconscious. Then she spotted a man among the group. He didn't look particularly strong, his muscles smaller than Schwarzenegger's, but he was rock hard, and at first glance, one could imagine the explosive power he possessed. She knew how powerful that power was, having experienced it firsthand. Elizabeth began to recall the events of last night, mostly images of Locke slaughtering them one by one, leaving them screaming and utterly defeated, and she herself among them. The clearest image that flashed through her mind was a bride in her wedding dress and her friends in bridesmaids' gowns, lined up in a room, sprawled on the thick carpet. Although she had heard of some of her female scientists, waking up in the morning and seeing unfamiliar faces was something she had envied and imagined she might experience in the future. Elizabeth had had several boyfriends before, but what she was seeing was a first, and she felt that this might be a night to remember. "Hey, everyone," Locke woke up quickly, greeting them cheerfully, and then, as if setting off a chain reaction, the other girls woke up one after another. They were also a little dazed at first, but soon someone screamed, "It's already 9 o'clock, 9 o'clock, no, we're going to be late." Senior sister Catherine finally came back to her senses from her half-sleep, checked the time, and then looked down at the white gauze dress on her body. "My wedding dress, senior sister, don't worry, the wedding is at noon." Elizabeth shuddered and said quickly, "We still have time." "Indeed, we still have time." Catherine quickly calmed down, but looked at the wedding dress on her body that was already in a mess, and frowned. "But we don't have time to order another wedding dress, and there are also your bridesmaid dresses. Leave it to me." At this time, Locke said very calmly, "I'll call the bridal shop, and they will soon prepare the corresponding wedding dresses for you to choose from. You just need to pack up and go over to choose the right one. I'll take care of the rest." "Thank you so much." Catherine smiled, hugged Locke's head and pressed it on him. The two of them separated for a while, then she smiled and said, "Do you want to keep this wedding dress of mine as a souvenir?" "No, you can keep it," Locke said calmly. "As for the new wedding dress, consider it my wedding gift to you." "That's so thoughtful of you." Catherine smiled, looking at her best friend. "Elizabeth, you'll have to help me choose one and contact my stylist. I need to call my dear fiancé right now." "Of course, Elizabeth watched Catherine speak to him naturally, saying she might need to spend a little more time on her hair so he could see her at her most beautiful. Looking at the senior's face, so rosy and charming, so rosy it would make water come out if pinched, the future most understanding female doctor felt she had learned something. She thought to herself, she's worthy of being my idol. She's so calm at this moment. I still have a lot to learn. After all, last night was so exciting. It was a bachelorette party, and the atmosphere was right. A little bit of a stunt was fine, as long as the groom didn't know. After making a few calls, Locke got into the car, feeling a little sore in his back and legs. Even with a physique several times stronger than an average person, it was almost too much. My marriage is really over, Ross said, sprawled on the sofa, dejected. Carol didn't choose me, but Susan. Can you believe it? Yes, of course. Locke, Joey, Monica, and Phoebe all responded in unison. Why? Ross couldn't help but rage, his roaring outburst unleashing. Don't get excited. She doesn't appreciate you, Monica advised. Maybe it's because women understand women better, Phoebe said with a smile. Nice, Joey looked fascinated. Locke thought back to the original plot. Carol and Ross had been separated for almost 6 months, and by the time the divorce papers were finalized, she was already over a month pregnant. It was clear that she was Ross's tool. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelists. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 109. I am helping him. Everyone has a job, even stay-at-home moms. In the morning, they have to cook breakfast for the kids. After breakfast, they have to drive them to school. And when they get home, they have to tidy up the house, clean, shop, and prepare dinner. These seemingly simple tasks are truly time-consuming and energy-consuming. Especially with many children, a stay-at-home mom can be driven crazy. Lynette was in that same situation right now, driven almost insane by her hyperactive twins. So, seeing Susan driving home from shopping, she couldn't help but feel envious. Susan's daughter, Julie, was a straight-A student at school, helping Susan with all the chores around the house. She was smart, enthusiastic, and considerate, the perfect child. But Susan was troubled by what she had witnessed that day. What happened here? You and Julie just, hey, relax, Ms. Susan, Locke said to Susan as she entered the room. I was just explaining a math problem to her. What are you thinking? She's only in high school, Susan exclaimed excitedly. Mom, relax a little, Julie said. We were just sitting a little close, just a little close. You were almost sticking to each other, Susan couldn't help but said loudly. You know he is a playboy and has more than one girlfriend. Mom, there's nothing between him and me, Julie emphasized again. He just taught me some study problems. You know, he is a student at Princeton University and has a full scholarship. Then you can go find Peggy. She is also a student at Princeton University and also has a full scholarship. But Peggy, Julie wanted to explain, but Locke interrupted her directly. Okay, Ms. Susan, I understand your concerns, and I promise nothing will happen, Locke said calmly. Is that all right? Okay. After calming down a little, Susan stared at Locke with a serious expression for a long time, and finally nodded. I know, I may have overreacted, but I can understand, Ms. Susan, Locke said calmly. I'm just explaining some issues to Julie. After Susan left, Julie sighed. I hope you don't mind. My mother sometimes misunderstands and overreacts easily, especially recently. She has been a little anxious about preparing for the wedding. It's nothing, Locke shrugged. I just think it will be a headache when you get home. Yeah, I know, Julie nodded helplessly, and then said to Locke, anyway, thank you for your explanation today. It's nothing, we are friends, Locke said. Also, if you have any questions, you can also ask Leonard. I just found out today that he and you are classmates, Leonard. I heard that you went to our school today and scared Jimmy so much that he peed his pants. It was because of him. He is your friend. Yeah, Locke said. He's my friend, and a genius. He can help you with all your questions. I know. He's only 12, but he's already in high school with us, Julie nodded, thinking that birds of a feather flock together. Locke had so many talented friends. Jimmy, that school bully, isn't liked by many, but he's on the football team, so no one wants to mess with him and tries to avoid him, Julie thought of some things she'd heard and said, "I don't know why, but I've seen Jimmy specifically picking on Leonard these past few days. It's a good thing you showed up today, otherwise Leonard would have been bullied by Jimmy for the next few years. Maybe it's Jimmy's luck," Locke said. "I'm helping him, huh?" Julie felt her mind boggling. "You scared someone to death in public, and now it's all over the school, and you say you're helping him." Locke didn't explain. He knew that if Leonard wasn't a comedic character, given his experience and the unique characteristics of American television, he would have become a sociopathic villain. Could anyone tolerate Sheldon's personality? Leonard, his closest friend, had endured Beverly, the female version of Sheldon, since childhood, and now has been enduring Sheldon himself. He's a true Ninja Turtle. Strip away the comedic aura and think carefully, someone this patient is definitely not an ordinary person. It's fine if they don't explode, but once they reach their limit, a comedy becomes a horror thriller in a matter of seconds. This isn't just speculation, it's a very real possibility. Leonard is currently enduring the dual pressures of Beverly and young Sheldon, which is already incredibly stressful. If the school bully Jimmy really pushes Leonard to his limit and causes him to rebound, imagine the terrifying image of a classic high IQ criminal from film and television. Those who cross them will surely die without a trace of knowing how they did it. So Jimmy was terrified, and while it's a bit embarrassing to say it, Locke felt he should be grateful that he saved his life. After Julie left, Locke packed up and returned to his study. "Beverly called just now," Peggy said. "Is it about Sheldon?" Locke quickly guessed the reason. "Well, little Sheldon hasn't come home from school yet, and Beverly asked you if we knew where he was." "No surprise, he should be cleaning his dorm." Locke smiled at this. Because of his young age, little Sheldon was living with Beverly. But one day, when he learned that Peggy had her own dorm for naps, he immediately asked the principal for the same treatment. After being annoyed countless times by little Sheldon, the principal finally relented and provided Sheldon with a luxurious single room, just like Peggy's. This accommodation made the other students envious and resentful. The problem was that little Sheldon was known as a troublemaker at school. No one liked him, and he became a target of public criticism. Fortunately, as the protagonist, little Sheldon had a certain aura, and he unintentionally made the best choice for himself. When other students asked to borrow his dorm room for study, he felt that he was very motivated and teachable, so he readily agreed. As word spread, pairs of study partners began asking for Sheldon's dorm room, calling him their friend because of the convenience he provided. As these study partners grew, and the queues grew, Sheldon realized he wasn't making the most of his free time in the dorm, so he began making his own schedule. Sheldon loved planning his time, so this was a double joy for him. But today, during recess, someone else asked for Sheldon's dorm room again. He used this as an excuse to refute Peggy's claim that he had no friends at school. At that moment, Sheldon felt like a true triumph. He had so many friends at school, while Peggy, aside from Locke, had few friends either. He had won this battle. But he was quickly slapped in the face when Locke revealed the truth. Disgusted, Sheldon skipped class and headed straight to his dorm room, where he cleaned up himself, a feat he hasn't finished yet. Chapter 110 Big Melon and Wedding. At the villa in Fairview Town, "Locke, have you heard?" Ashley said. Mr. Rex's pharmacist was arrested for allegedly attempting to murder Mr. Rex by substituting his medication. "I heard," Locke nodded. "He was trying to woo Bree, but Mr. Rex and Bree seem to be getting along better lately, and they're not moving forward with their divorce. He's unwilling to accept this and wants to get rid of Mr. Rex. This is horrible. How could someone like him exist?" Ashley sighed. "I don't know why Mrs. Bree was friends with him in the first place." News spread quickly in the small town. After receiving Locke's warning at the party that day, Mr. Rex took his unused medication for testing. The results revealed the pharmacist's problems, and with sufficient evidence, the mentally ill pharmacist was arrested and imprisoned awaiting trial. Lawyers in the United States are expensive, especially those with high reputations and expertise, who can successfully help criminals escape punishment by making the dead appear alive in court. Even if a person is successfully convicted, the judge's discretion is often generous, and prison sentences are determined by the judge's own convictions. Furthermore, there are various post-incarceration commutations, facilitating a quicker release. However, these policies serve the well-connected few. In other words, ordinary people and the poor are not worthy of these freedoms and equality. The pharmacist earns a good salary, but he can't possibly afford these services. Mr. Rex's income and reputation are far superior, so it's no surprise that the pharmacist will likely spend the rest of his life in prison. This topic will be a hot topic of gossip among the town's housewives for some time to come, particularly the reasons behind the pharmacist's murder. Ashley has heard several versions of the story and discussed them with Locke. Of course, in most of them, Bree's role is less than impressive. For years, Bree's image as the perfect wife has made her a popular figure among the Fairview housewives, but this has also drawn the jealousy of many, leading to all sorts of slander. Even news of Susan's upcoming wedding has been suppressed by the shocking revelation. The wedding date had been set, and Locke had even asked Monica and the others about bringing them along for the fun. "I'm Mike. You're Locke's friends, right? I'm so glad you're here for my wedding," Mike, dressed in a suit, greeted them, hearing they were Locke's friends. "Hello, Monica, Chandler, Joey, Phoebe, Martha, and Ross all shook Mike's hand. "This wedding is massive. It's the A-list wedding of my dreams," Monica couldn't help but exclaim upon arriving at the manor and taking in the setting. "What do you mean by A-list wedding?" Chandler and the others asked, somewhat surprised. "It's the ideal wedding," Monica explained briefly. "Every girl imagines her wedding from the moment she grows up. In Monica's mind, a grand, perfect wedding would cost around $50,000. Back in the 1990s, when the dollar was still very strong, Rachel from Friends, whose father was a renowned surgeon and whose husband was a highly profitable dentist, only spent $40,000 on her wedding." Monica couldn't help but exclaim in admiration at the spectacle before her. "The wedding will cost about $30,000, Locke said, understanding Monica's thoughts. "What? How is that possible?" Monica said in disbelief. "Mike advanced me $30,000 for this wedding, and it all went towards this one," Locke said. "That's almost 80% of his compensation for the work he did for me. It's not surprising that the wedding cost less than you thought," Chandler said. "Don't forget, this is Locke's estate. Normally, renting a mansion of this size and furnishing it would cost a fortune." "I see," Monica nodded, then looked at Locke again. "I know. When you get married, I'll take care of the venue and decor," Locke smiled. "I'm sure you'll be satisfied." "That's great," Monica and the others happily agreed. Locke's estate was more upscale than many hotels, and holding a wedding there would be even more prestigious. But then Monica felt a little disappointed. "But right now I don't even have a boyfriend. I don't know how long I'll have to wait to plan a wedding." "Don't worry, you're all my good friends. I'm sure you'll meet the right person," Locke said with a smile, then looked at Ross. "Of course, it's only one chance. Why are you looking at me?" Ross couldn't help but exclaim, feeling Locke's gaze implying something. "Nothing. I just hope some divorcee-savvy people will carefully consider how to use this opportunity. I've only been divorced once." Ross blushed. "I'm not some divorcee. Believe in yourself. Even if you don't believe in yourself, trust my judgment. I think your next marriage will definitely be shorter than your last." Glancing at Ross, whose face was flushing, Locke continued, "The divorce rate in the United States is as high as 50%, and the average person falls in love 11 times in a lifetime. According to you, this is your first time with Carol. You still have many chances. Don't get excited." Chandler smiled, hugging Ross, whose face was flushing. "That's not a bad way to think about it. There are 10 girls waiting for you." "Yes, I actually love weddings," Joey said with a smile. "You like to pick up single girls at weddings, don't you?" Locke bluntly stated Joey's thoughts. The joyful atmosphere of a wedding has a profound impact on single women, igniting their emotions. Just like Barney in How I Met Your Mother, who particularly enjoyed attending the groom's bachelor party, he even enjoyed attending weddings even more. Because the beautiful bridesmaids, stirred by the wedding atmosphere, have already aroused their emotional side. Strike at this moment, and your chances of success increase several-fold. He's even compiled a list of tricks used against bridesmaids and even brides at weddings, including a guide to picking up girls. As the archetypal playboy from Friends, Joey naturally has a deep understanding of wedding tactics. "Do you want to seize the opportunity?" Locke said to Chandler, gesturing towards Martha. "No thanks," Chandler shook his head, then said, "I've been having some issues with her lately." "What's wrong?" Locke asked. "Martha's a great person, and we're always happy together, but she's usually too busy," Chandler said with some resignation. Being a police officer is an extremely busy profession, especially since Martha is the head of the serious crime squad. Overtime is the norm, and naturally, the time the two spend together is affected. There were even 2 occasions when the two finally found an opportunity to get together, but at this time, a sudden case occurred, and Martha had to interrupt the date to rush to work. Over time, Chandler and Martha's relationship naturally had some problems. After hearing this explanation, Locke couldn't help but glance at Monica. He had originally thought that since Chandler had met Martha, who was a perfect match for him, he and Monica might not necessarily end up together in the future, but now it seems that some things are still very inertial. Chapter 111 Sisters Meet for the First Time. How are you planning to spend Christmas next month? Monica asked, perhaps because of Chandler, noticing Locke's gaze. I think I'll probably go back to Texas early, after finals, Locke said. Student days were so good. You could get off early, Chandler said with a hint of nostalgia. Yeah, Ross said with a nostalgic look. Remember when we used to hang out together during the holidays? Those were the good old days, indeed, Chandler exclaimed. Chandler and Ross had been childhood friends, hanging out together since they were little, and even went to Columbia University together. They were definitely close friends. Hearing them sigh, Monica curled her lips in a sour tone. She hadn't gone to college after high school, choosing to be a chef. While it was a profession she loved, she still felt a slight sense of regret. Phoebe, on the other hand, looked hopeful. Due to family circumstances, she had been living on the streets as a child and hadn't even had the chance to attend high school. Joey had also dropped out of high school to become an actor, but he feigned deep agreement and nodded slowly, trying to blend in. Locke, aren't you an orphan? Why are you going back to Texas? Monica asked. Ashley, Peggy, and Sheldon all have families in Texas, so I can give them a visit. Besides, Alice doesn't want to go home, so it's a good opportunity for her to go back with me and see where I used to live. Sounds great, Joey nodded. I was thinking of inviting you over to our house. We're a big family, and every Christmas is always a lively one. I was thinking of inviting Locke to our house for Christmas, too. Monica ignored Ross's wide eyes. What a shame, I'll probably spend Christmas in New York someday, Locke smiled. It wasn't a polite remark. After all, he was an orphan in this life, and without a family, he had little motivation to go back to Texas specifically for the holidays. Just like this time, it was mainly to send Peggy and Ashley back. Tang Wei had fallen out with her father, and she didn't particularly like Christmas herself. She missed the spring festival of her childhood, when the whole family would gather to greet each other, run around with the kids, and have fun. After arriving in the United States, her Christmases had been rather dull. Her father often worked overtime at the casino, leaving her home alone in an unfamiliar environment. Even Christmas presents often slipped through the cracks. So, this Christmas, she chose to stay with Locke. Speaking of which, American Christmas isn't even the birthday of Jesus. Its global popularity stems entirely from America's own persistent marketing. It originated from a marketing scheme for Fat Nerd Happy Water. To boost sales, company executives ultimately settled on the European tradition of Christmas, reimagining it with Santa Claus and continuously reinforcing the concept through marketing. Countless businesses, hearing about this, followed suit, as the Christmas concept perfectly suited their interests. Everyone claimed Santa Claus would bring gifts to children, but it wasn't the parents who actually paid for the gifts. Thanks to America's powerful influence, Christmas grew in strength and spread worldwide. This process mirrored the ongoing promotional efforts of some businesses in the East, aimed at attracting more consumers. Year after year, the popularity of the holiday even began to rival the Spring Festival. This momentum was only halted by the Divine Beast. Hi, Locke. Just then, a girl approached from a distance to greet them. Seeing Chandler and the others, she asked, "Are these your friends, Caroline?" Locke said to Martin Channing's daughter. "Everyone, this is Caroline, and this is Monica, Phoebe, Chandler, Ross, and Joey." Ever since they'd met before, Caroline had seemed quite curious about Locke, a man even her father admired privately. She'd been in regular contact, and gradually, they'd become familiar. This time, upon hearing that Locke was attending a friend's wedding, also at Locke's estate, she decided to attend. Caroline, meticulously dressed, was a stunning sight. Her natural beauty was already top-notch, and with Franklin's help, everyone was stunned. Chandler was the most polite and quickest to react, nudging Ross and Joey. "Hi," Joey realized as Caroline took Locke's arm, avoiding the classic Joe-style greeting. Although Joey was a playboy, he was quite particular. Even if he wanted to pursue a friend's ex-girlfriend, he'd at least let him know beforehand. If he encountered opposition, he'd probably give up immediately. Ross, on the other hand, was still dazed. Caroline, dressed up like a princess, made him unable to look away. Monica, noticing her youth, asked, "Caroline, are you in college too?" "I'm still in high school." Caroline shook her head. "But I've got an offer from Wharton and will be attending next year." "You're impressive to have gotten an offer from Wharton so early," Monica remarked. Wharton is a prestigious school in the U.S., especially in economics, with many talented alumni. Caroline secured her spot so early, naturally, because of her father, Martin Channing. "It's a lot of pressure, actually," Caroline said with a reserved smile. "Pressure is a good thing." Seeing such a beautiful woman like Caroline being so close to Locke made him feel uncomfortable, and he acted like he was giving her a lecture. Feeling pressure means you're really studying. And the academic pressure during high school and undergraduate school was really average. When you start graduate school or even get a doctorate, you'll know what real pressure is. Seeing Ross taking Joe, Locke, with a sly grin in his eyes, squeezed Caroline's hand. "I forgot to tell you, maybe you should call him Dr. Geller, Dr. Geller," Caroline said, taking Locke's hint with a polite smile. "I wonder what you got your doctorate in. Science, medicine, or law?" Ross's smug expression froze. Science has a hierarchy of contempt, just like Sheldon often says that geography and archaeology aren't real sciences, because he's confident enough to say it. Mathematics and physics are at the top of the scientific contempt hierarchy. In the eyes of ordinary people, doctors of medicine and doctors of law who can earn a lot of money are the ones worthy of respect, but Ross chose neither. He was just a PhD in archaeology, at the very bottom of the scientific contempt hierarchy. Sheldon wouldn't dare refute him if he told him face to face that it wasn't real science. He earned a modest salary, and working in a museum was, at best, a leisurely and respectable job. When Caroline and Locke were chatting, they also discussed his friends, so she knew Rose. She'd been influenced by her father every day, and her emotional intelligence was incredibly high. With just one sentence, she silenced Rose. Seeing Rose hesitate, Caroline turned to Locke. "Did you hire all the waiters for this wedding?" "Some are from the estate. And some are temporary hires," Locke asked. "What's the problem? Is there anyone named Max among them?" Caroline asked. Chapter 112 Don't Tell the Truth. Monica and the others, upon seeing Caroline arrive, tacitly agreed to leave their time with the two of them. He was taken aback when Caroline suddenly mentioned Maximum. Could it be that Caroline had just met her future best friend? "There's no servant named Max at the manor, but the wedding arrangements were so complicated that they hired someone else," Locke replied. "What about this Max you're talking about?" "When I arrived, I was chatting with some guests about Dad's fun company, and then I overheard her chatting with the other waiters. She said it was so popular, it sounded like a scam. She doesn't understand finance at all, yet she's spouting nonsense," Caroline said indignantly. "When you find the person, you must fire him." Caroline was naturally upset that someone was questioning her father, whom she admired so much, but she considered herself a respectable person and didn't want to argue with a small waiter. She decided to have Locke fire him directly. "Don't worry, I'll go ask if there's such a person." Locke wasn't sure if Caroline was referring to the Max she was talking about, and their first meeting seemed rather unfriendly. However, Locke didn't take their minor verbal disagreement to heart. "There's no need to argue with a waitress who knows nothing. I'll just warn her later," Locke advised Caroline. "It's not easy for her to find a job." Seeing Locke's words, Caroline, unwilling to let him think she was being stingy, relented. "Okay, but you must warn her properly." "Leave it to me," Locke assured, patting his chest. Caroline Channing and Max were truly close friends. Many people who had watched Two Broke Girls felt they should be together. If Max was truly the one who stood out from the crowd, Locke would find it quite amusing. She had quite the foresight to spot Martin Channing's Ponzi scheme. Don't underestimate the rich. They, like ordinary people, have all sorts of character flaws. Their greater success stems not only from a more comprehensive education, but also from access to vastly superior resources and information, which combined to form a class barrier. Everyone Martin Channing duped was a member of the so-called elite, yet they were all enamored with the high returns he offered. When the scam finally collapsed, the entire American financial system was devastated, with scores of people going bankrupt and jumping off buildings. These cases, like the pig-killing scams Locke had witnessed in his previous life, exploited greed by offering high interest rates. Rich people had heard of these scams, too, But there would always be a shortage of victims, both past and future, because they, like ordinary people, were greedy and blinded by profit. After verbally agreeing to Caroline's request, Locke contacted the company that hosted the event and asked them to bring a list of waiters. Using the list, he asked them to summon the person Caroline had mentioned, Max. Upon seeing the real person, Locke immediately confirmed that the familiar yet somewhat youthful girl was none other than Max. "Hey, buddy, I know I'm big, but you don't have to keep staring at me." Seeing Locke's momentary daze, the girl immediately launched into a barrage of savage words. Ahem, Locke felt a little guilty at the other's bluntness, but thankfully, having been a jerk for so long, he quickly adjusted himself and teased, "Sorry, I'm from Texas." "Huh, Max?" A young woman looked at Locke with some surprise. "You're a rich guy, okay? I like that. Texas is known for its size. They like everything big, and Max clearly fits that bill perfectly." When Max said she liked him, she didn't mean it in that way. She admired Locke's straightforwardness, unlike the pretentiousness of some upper-class people, and the mutual sympathy they felt for each other when they could reciprocate. "Why did you end up here as a waiter?" Locke was curious, wondering where the contracting company had hired this talented person. "If you don't waiter to make money, are you going to stand on the street?" Although Max looked immature, her Brooklyn upbringing had already shaped her outspokenness and sharp tongue, which flowed freely. "With these two babies, I'm afraid many people would beg you to work on the street." Locke found it quite amusing, and couldn't help but tease. "If it really came to that, would you support me?" Max, undeterred, said nothing. Locke was beginning to feel a bit overwhelmed by this point and could only smile awkwardly, thinking to himself, as they say, when women get frivolous, men really have nothing to lose. "Okay, I called you here this time because of something," Locke said, not continuing. "Someone just heard you say Martin Channing sounds like a liar. Where did you hear that?" "Did some bitch tell me about it behind my back?" Max asked. "Do you know that rich guy named Martin Channing?" "I do know Martin Channing. A friend of mine told me you were a liar, so you want to fire me," Max said bluntly. Before Locke could finish, "You rich guys are all in the same boat." "Wait, not really. I just want you to be a little more careful next time. Martin Channing's a big shot on Wall Street. Don't just go around saying the truth." Locke smiled and said, "Can we make another friend? You rich guy want to date me?" Seeing Locke's aggressive flirting, Max didn't answer directly, but stared at Locke and asked, "Would you be honored?" Locke didn't care about the other person's address. "I like what you said just now." Max smiled and handed over a phone number. "I still have work to do for you right now. Call me when I'm free." Watching Max leave, Locke thought to himself that Max was indeed Max. He just didn't know what the future held for her and Caroline because of him. Having watched Two Broke Girls, he had a fondness for both girls. Caroline, despite falling from the abyss, never gave up hope. Even after falling from the peak to the bottom, she didn't give up, remaining true to her original aspirations and striving to move forward. Max, born in Brooklyn, had seen and experienced much tragedy since childhood, yet she had always maintained her kindness, rather than becoming completely numb and indifferent. In a previous life, I heard a quote online, "I smoke, drink, and have tattoos, but I'm a good girl." While this quote might be mocking to some girls, it truly reflects Max. Her upbringing wasn't something she could choose, she had given it her all. However, lacking exceptional talent and opportunity, no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't break through the class barriers, ultimately resigning herself to reality. However, Locke felt that since she had met him, she had also encountered the greatest opportunity in her life. Chapter 113 Big Bear, and serves him specially. Princeton University. Today was finals, and after the exams, little Sheldon spotted Beverly standing at the classroom door. "Where are you going?" Beverly asked. "Let's go to the comic book store first." "It's been ages." "Okay," Beverly nodded, indicating they were on their way. Little Sheldon was eager to try. The pressure from Peggy and Locke had forced him to become the ultimate test-taker, completely changing his original schedule. It had been ages since he'd been to his beloved comic book store. After these exams, he'd successfully earned credits in a single semester that would take an average student over a year, and he was ready to treat himself during the break. Unlike his mother, Mary, Beverly wasn't deterred by the explicit and vulgar comics. He was going to take the opportunity to buy all the issues he'd missed and enjoy them during the break. Just as he was filled with excitement, he saw Peggy and Locke emerging from the classroom hand in hand, discussing where to take their afternoon exams. His expression immediately darkened, knowing that Peggy and Locke had more exams to take this final semester than he did. This meant they could both earn more credits and get their bachelor's degrees faster. One step faster, one step faster. Even after repeated pestering and tirelessly bothering the president, he finally got him to agree to the same preferential treatment next semester. But he could already imagine these two people getting their doctorates first. At this thought, his previous excitement vanished. "Hello," Beverly greeted the two. "Hi, Locke." Next came the low-profile Leonard, who had also come along for the tour. "Hello," Locke nodded and looked at Leonard. "I'm sorry I couldn't accompany you this morning. How was your visit to the university today?" "It was good. The people here are very welcoming," Leonard said after a moment's hesitation. He had followed Beverly to campus that morning, but Beverly had quickly abandoned their son to focus on her own research. Locke took him to Peggy's dorm to rest. Entering the co-ed dorm for the first time, he couldn't take his eyes off the scantily clad girls walking by, his only thought being, "I love this place." Later, because he had an exam, Locke allowed Leonard to wander the campus on his own. Unexpectedly, upon opening the door, he saw a beautiful woman walking out of the dorm across the street. Seeing the 12-year-old Leonard emerge from Peggy's dorm, Elizabeth Plimpton asked him how he got there. Learning that Leonard was Locke's friend, she pulled him into her dorm and pried him inquiringly about Locke. Having rarely interacted with girls since childhood, Leonard felt a little overwhelmed by the enthusiastic inquiries. The sheer variety of intimate items scattered throughout the dorm made him unsure where to look. Before he knew it, the entire morning had already passed. Fortunately, he had noticed the time and hurried over to join the group. So, when Locke asked him about his campus tour, he didn't dare admit that the only thing he'd seen was the sheer variety of intimate items in the dorm across the street. "I don't like this kind of enthusiasm," young Sheldon said, clearly not understanding the rich experience behind Leonard's words. He frowned and said, "But there's nothing I can do about it. Whether in high school or college, I was the most popular. Back in high school, I used my calculations to help my dad's football team win game after game. After that, everyone at school welcomed me warmly. But the most annoying thing was the cheerleaders. They loved to hold me in their arms and rub me hard. At only 9 years old, I couldn't resist. You know, it would suffocate me." Hearing young Sheldon say this, Leonard couldn't help but stare at him in surprise. This was the first time he'd heard young Sheldon talk about this experience, and he could already imagine the scene in his mind. It was nothing compared to what he was experiencing today. This made Leonard want to replace him again, but for a different reason. "I think your friend Dan has different ideas from you," Locke interjected. "Dan did say he envied me, but he obviously hasn't experienced that awful feeling himself, otherwise he wouldn't have said it," young Sheldon, recalling his high school friend Dan's reaction, said it matter-of-factly. Leonard twitched his lips, suppressing his envy and resentment with all his might, hoping his mother, Beverly, wouldn't notice him, as that would surely reveal some personal secrets he didn't want revealed. Central Park Apartments. Chandler looked at Monica busy in the kitchen and said, "So, at the wedding, Locke hooked up with a waitress." "That's right," Phoebe said, sitting at the table. "And I heard that waitress didn't leave with him after the wedding, but stayed at Locke's mansion." "Wow, that development was pretty quick," Chandler said curiously. "Was that waitress beautiful?" "Very fierce," Monica couldn't help but exclaim. Even though she'd only met him once, she knew the strength of that guy named Max. It was undeniable. Every time she thought about it, she felt it was too much. "More brutal than Ashley, of course, 2 levels more brutal," Monica nodded. "Don't you men like it as brutal as possible?" "Of course," Chandler said without hesitation. "Most men are the same. They like beautiful women with good figures." "How?" Monica sneered, then said thoughtfully, "I just think there's something special about the women around Locke." "What's special about them?" Chandler was puzzled. "I can't really put it into words," Monica thought for a moment. "It's just a feeling." "Yeah, a woman's intuition," Phoebe agreed. "And I'm sure the woman is an expert. Otherwise, who would stay the night after just meeting?" "That's too fast." Phoebe, a seasoned professional, had a slightly different focus from Monica's. Click, the three were discussing when the door opened, and Locke and Max walked in together. "Hi, everyone," Locke was the first to greet them. "What are you discussing?" Monica didn't answer. Chandler's attention was all on Max beside Locke. He had only one feeling in his heart, that is, what Monica said was really not an exaggeration. Only Phoebe said, "We were saying that you and Max are progressing very quickly." Locke didn't answer. Instead, Max smiled and said, "That may be because I'm Big Bear, and I'm a waiter who serves him." Where on earth did Locke find such a top-notch person? Now even the experienced Phoebe couldn't stand Max's blunt and dirty talk. Chapter 114 The Joy of Target Practice, Monthly Ticket Bonus. Locke, since you're all done with your exams and on vacation, are you planning on going back now? Max's dirty jokes were a little off-putting to Monica and the others, who no longer had the heart to tease Locke, and quickly changed the subject. Let's wait a few days. Max and I just got to know each other, so we should have a good time together for a couple of days, Locke said. Do you need me to take you home? Phoebe asked. Locke, of course, we'll fly back, Chandler laughed. He's damn rich, thank you, but you won't have to drive. Peggy, Sheldon, Alice, and Ashley will be going too, so it's going to be a bit too crowded, Locke said. We'll fly together then, okay? Monica knew about Locke, Peggy, and Sheldon's little circle. She'd once been quite curious about this circle of top talents. Later, after hearing Alice, Tang Wei, and Ashley's casual chats, she realized that even though she and Locke were close, she couldn't become a part of it. Over the next few days, Locke took Max on a fun outing around New York. His biggest surprise was that Max actually took an interest in target shooting. He knew Max enjoyed playing with guns, but he hadn't expected her to enjoy actual target shooting. So, he and Max went to work on their shooting techniques. Most competitors used handguns, which are easy to use, but Locke went right to work on a large caliber rifle. He first explained the basics of guns, such as models, construction, and holding position, as well as some safety guidelines. Once he was sure Max understood, he began the actual practice. They say America is a happy place. When Locke first started shooting, he hit the target with his first shot, and it was incredibly steady. Every gun has recoil, and the more powerful the weapon, the greater the recoil, such as with rifles that are much larger than a typical pistol. As a newbie, Locke felt a significant recoil due to the forces of physics, but his accuracy remained astonishing, and the muzzle remained steady, hitting the target with his first shot. Now a seasoned shooter, Locke mastered the target practice with Max, mastering power, accuracy, and recoil to perfection. His strong physique gave him incredible stability and endurance, allowing him to hit the bullseye with every shot. With the rhythmic cheers of encouragement swirling in his ears, his blood surged, and he felt completely at ease. Max, no longer able to cheer Locke on, finally emptied the magazine in one go. It was unexpectedly exhilarating. From fixed to moving targets, from short-range to long-range combat, the two men's coordination continued to improve. Max was incredulous. She considered herself no longer a novice, but her performance was just average. Locke, however, was a true master. If she hadn't experienced it firsthand, she wouldn't have believed anyone could achieve such a feat. By the end, she was completely exhausted. A few days later, Locke drove a few people to the airport, using a dedicated lane. Out of respect for Franklin, despite Sheldon's nasty words, the airport staff chose not to give him the standard procedure. Faced with this completely different treatment, Sheldon commented that the airport staff were becoming increasingly incompetent. After settling into their seats, Sheldon took out a video game console Beverly had bought, while Peggy pulled out a notebook. Seeing Peggy scribbling in her notebook, Sheldon couldn't help but lean over and ask, "What are you doing?" "Learning from someone," Peggy said, glancing at Locke. Locke's lips twitched, and he knew Peggy was referring to her high school lottery calculations. Yesterday, while shopping in New York, Ashley spotted a lottery shop and bought a lottery ticket for several people, saying that whoever won would be responsible for buying a gift for the others. Peggy then explained that anyone who bought a ticket according to her calculations would win, adding that Locke had done the same thing in high school and had stumbled upon the notebook Locke used for his calculations. Ashley and Tang Wei then started to argue, asking why they shouldn't accept the free money, which meant Peggy had to keep busy during Christmas break. Beep. Before Sheldon could ask more, the flight attendant's voice came over the PA. "Attention all passengers, due to an overbooking of 2 seats, we're asking if anyone has volunteers to take the next flight. As a token of our gratitude, we'd like to offer you an extra ticket to any destination. To maximize profits, American Airlines are accustomed to overselling tickets to prevent cancellations and changes that reduce seat occupancy. However, this practice leads to the current situation, especially during peak season and special holidays, when overcrowding is commonplace. Of course, overcrowding is not tolerated, and in such cases, Airlines offer similar incentives to remove the excess passengers. But after the announcement, the passengers looked at each other. No one offered to take the offer. While there was compensation, no one was willing to take it. Christmas was a time of tight travel, and they didn't want to risk missing out on their family reunion for a free ticket. In such cases, airlines have another solution: randomly select 2 passengers to get off the plane and on to the next flight. Oh, randomly? I don't want to be chosen, Sheldon couldn't help but exclaim. Don't worry, we won't be chosen, Locke said calmly. How could that be? Since it's random, there's a chance we'll be chosen, Sheldon retorted. That's simple math, because we're in first class, Locke said. So we can't be in the random sequence, are you sure? Sheldon retorted. I don't see such a rule in the airline's regulations. Of course I'm sure, Locke stared at Sheldon. Because I'm Batman. The most impressive thing about Batman is, of course, his wealth. Passengers who can sit in first class are wealthy, and airlines don't choose to offend wealthy people. You're not Batman, Sheldon shouted. Even Batman can't change the airline's rules. Batman can, Locke stared into Sheldon's eyes. The Wayne Group owns the airline, he can do that. Even if Batman can, you can't, because you don't own the airline, Sheldon continued to retort. Are you sure? Locke stared at Sheldon intently. Seeing Locke's look, Sheldon paused, his mouth agape. He'd faced Locke's gaze numerous times this semester, and the result had always been a stress reaction. After a classic eye twitch and cheek twitch, Sheldon ran to the restroom. During this brief moment, the flight attendant had already selected a black couple. Back in the 1990s, Black Lives Matter wasn't yet an era. After a brief argument, they were quickly escorted off. Chapter 115 Arrival in Texas. Okay, they'll be here soon, George, waiting at the airport exit, checked the time, then glanced at his wife, whose face was filled with anxiety. He reassured her, don't worry, Sheldon will be fine. Locke's with him, too, I know, but Shelley's not even 12 yet. He's never been away from me this long. Mary's face remained etched with worry and anxiety, as she kept glancing toward the airport exit. Missy, standing nearby, curled her lips. If it weren't for seeing Peggy again, she wouldn't have come along. She and Peggy had been close friends for a while. That was her happiest time, because Peggy was just as smart as Sheldon, and the two of them played together. This brought joy to her, despite having endured Sheldon's constant ridicule of her intelligence since childhood. Peggy was not only her friend, but also the embodiment of her fantasy of a sibling relationship. But as time went on, she found that they had less and less to talk about, and Peggy spoke more and more like Sheldon. After that, her contact with Peggy almost ceased, as if Sheldon never played with her, his daily focus on knowledge she couldn't understand. But deep down, he still loved Peggy and missed their time together. So, when she heard Peggy would be returning with Sheldon, she volunteered to go to the airport to meet her, hoping to see her again. As for little George, he'd given up on studying and was now focused on earning money. He hadn't attended high school classes in a while. After all, he figured, continuing to study wouldn't teach him much, so he'd rather work a few jobs to earn money than waste time in school, sitting idle in the classroom. They're here, Mary said, catching sight of her precious Shelley. Come on, Mr. Cooper. Locke noticed George's rapid progress and greeted them one by one. After a while, Mary finally let go of little Sheldon. She smiled and said, thanks for bringing Shelley back. Locke, would you like to come to our house? I've prepared my signature barbecue. You're welcome. Sheldon's a friend of mine, too. I have Peggy to take home next, and I have plans with my friends. Locke smiled and said, I'll visit her in a few days. Okay, have fun then. George glanced at Ashley and Chang Wei beside Locke, thinking that young people nowadays are even more extravagant than we were back then. Long time no see, Peggy. Missy greeted Peggy. You're getting prettier. Same to you, Peggy said with a smile. How was high school? It was pretty interesting. Plus, I became the best pitcher on the baseball team. Missy happily shared her little achievement with her sisters. That was great, Peggy nodded. It's a shame I couldn't see your game. No problem, I have a video of the game. When you come over to my house, we can watch it together, okay? Missy chattered, holding Peggy's hand, looking delighted. But Peggy's reaction was calmer and more polite. Missy, with her high emotional intelligence, soon noticed this and felt a sense of loss, thinking that the days of sisterhood they once shared were finally over. Hey, this is quite a lot, George said, taking Sheldon's luggage. "What's in it?" "My comics," Sheldon said frankly. "I didn't have time to read them at school, so I'm going to catch up on what I missed during the holidays." "Are you still reading those comics?" The devout Mary felt a pang of discomfort at the thought of the images she had seen in comic books, but she had no choice, after all. That was all her son loved. After the Sheldons drove away, a man in a suit and tie approached. "Is this Mr. Locke?" "It's me." Locke glanced at him. "I'm a Porsche salesperson. As you requested, the car you reserved over the phone is parked on the curb ahead. Please follow me." "Okay." Locke nodded and followed him to a curb outside the airport, where he saw the car he had reserved, which would also be his means of transportation in Texas during Christmas. After a quick inspection from the driver's seat, confirming the license plate, insurance, and other details, Locke signed the contract and paid the balance with a check. "Okay, let's get in the car," Locke said, greeting Peggy, Ashley, and Tang Wei as they headed towards Peggy's house. "Missy seems a little disappointed," Locke remarked casually on the way. "She'll have to get used to it, too. After all, everyone grows up, and at some point, you have to say goodbye to people from the past," Peggy said. "I'm past the point of playing with dolls with my sisters," Locke nodded. He didn't say anything about being only 12. He'd already known Peggy's precociousness, but he was more concerned about something else. "Peggy, has something happened at home? When I called earlier, it seemed like something wasn't right with them. Normally, someone from the Berries would have come to pick her up when Peggy returned for Christmas, but now they wanted Locke to take her back, clearly because something had changed at home." "They've separated," Peggy said calmly. "Grandma told me Dad's been hanging out at the bar, and Mom's found someone new." "What?" Locke was also slightly taken aback. He hadn't expected that his intervention, while helping Linda break away from Peggy and delaying the Berries' breakup, still hadn't prevented it. "Are you okay?" Locke looked at Peggy with some concern. "Nothing," Peggy said calmly. "That's how love, driven by hormones, is. Once the passion fades, all sorts of problems arise. It's nowhere near as long-lasting as a soulmate. You don't have to worry about it affecting me too much." Locke understood this, of course. The child's feeling of neglect was largely an excuse. The real reason was a lack of affection. After all, everyone has heard of the 7-year itch. This lack of affection, coupled with the traditional American belief in the right of freely pursuing one's own happiness, explains the persistently high divorce rate. He could tell Peggy was speaking her mind, but it was impossible for her to remain completely unaffected. Especially considering the impact of the Berries' divorce on Peggy in the original story, it was hard not to worry about her well-being. "Okay," Locke said, rubbing Peggy's head. "I'll rent a suite in a nearby hotel for the holidays and explore the world. If you're interested, we can come along." "Sure." Noticing Locke's concern, Peggy smiled and readily agreed. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 116, Little George Poole's Investment. After sending Peggy home, Locke, Ashley, and Tang Wei rested in the hotel for the night. Locke then escorted Ashley back to Prosperity alone. Prosperity had been severely impacted by the spider plague, with its population plummeting by nearly half. If it weren't for the reopening of the gold mine, the town would have been completely abandoned. But compared to its former self, Prosperity still seemed somewhat desolate. Samantha and Chris were both discussing buying a house in Dallas, settling there after more than a decade, when the new mine was depleted. When Locke returned to the hotel, he encountered an unexpected visitor. "I heard you were back in Texas. Why didn't you tell your old friends?" Deborah, who had arrived uninvited, selected a nice bottle of red wine from the room's wine cabinet and poured herself a glass. Locke was no stranger to the Romney Conti from over a decade ago, but aside from the high price, she didn't find anything special about it. Sky Fund's recent investment performance had been impressive. Locke couldn't track down the funds she had invested, but the returns on the principal guaranteed projects were regularly disclosed to clients. With Deborah's influence, even though the announced earnings had been minimized, she knew, based on some of the capital flows, that Sky Fund had made a fortune. Although Locke's chosen funding channels avoided the Ying family's assets, some information would still leak out. Bank leaks are not uncommon in the United States. Having anticipated this, Locke would regularly allocate a portion of his earnings to increase his acquisitions of shares in major banks. In addition to steadily buying up individual shares on the stock market, he also actively contacted the bank's shareholders. Acquiring shares isn't simply a matter of cash. The stock market has a limited supply of individual shares, and acquiring more requires the willingness of shareholders to invest. This process inevitably involves a premium. Because bank shares often offer stable returns, many people consider them heirlooms, and even at a premium, they are reluctant to sell. Locke could only instruct the asset management office to gather more information and wait for an opportunity. Needs for funds will always arise, whether for investment, personal enjoyment, debt, or even bankruptcy, which could provide Locke with an opportunity to acquire these shares. Deborah had come specifically to invite Locke to visit the Young family estate. She was a very determined person. Seeing that Locke was unwilling to take her out and only willing to promote the investment product at guaranteed principal plus fixed returns, she changed her strategy, no longer forcing him and instead focusing on cultivating a friendship with Locke. The two had never had much conflict to begin with. The ever-changing business world always had opportunities to use each other, and Locke naturally wouldn't give him a hard time. The Young family had been passed down for 5 generations, making it a vast family. Deborah's generation alone had hundreds of members. Most of them couldn't inherit and manage the core of the family business, relying solely on a monthly payment from a trust fund established by their ancestors. But this amount was enough for them to live better than ordinary people without having to work. The Young family estate spanned 3,400 acres, seemingly about the same size as the farm Locke had acquired. But unlike a farm used solely for farming and raising cattle, this estate comprised a complex of buildings, comparable to a town. Over so many generations, the Young family had its fair share of idlers and eccentrics, but also elites. Deborah was one of them, and a strong contender for the inheritance of the family business. Her great-grandfather, already in his 80s, claimed to have a personal fortune exceeding $1 billion, but in reality, he also had a vast amount of fixed assets in art that weren't accounted for. The value of the various assets he controlled was even greater. Some time ago, when Deborah turned 20, her great-grandfather gave her $10 million as startup capital. Through research, she zeroed in on Locke. She invited Locke to the manor, and he agreed, though he'd wait a few days. Tang Wei could sense that Deborah was different from the average rich girl. Typical rich girls, like Jenny, whom Tang Wei knew, spend their days obsessed with handsome men or the latest bags, clothes, and cosmetics from luxury stores. After the incident with the trafficker, she was even more certain that a powerful, handsome, and devoted man was silently protecting her. He had saved her from danger without leaving his name, 1,000 times better than that playboy Locke. Tang Wei chuckled inwardly every time she heard this, and even joked about it with Locke in private. Deborah, however, struck her as something completely different. He spoke eloquently not only about culture, language, art, and cuisine, but also offered profound insights into international affairs, industry changes, and economic fluctuations, leaving her feeling remarkably educated. The day after Deborah left, Locke and Tang Wei visited Sheldon's home and encountered George Jr., who was seeking investment. Locke was somewhat surprised. In his previous life, when he traveled through time, Sheldon Jr.'s storyline hadn't yet concluded. He had only witnessed George Jr. and the former weather forecaster having a child, but insisting they were still unmarried. The weather forecaster's family owned a tire shop. Given George Jr.'s future as a tire tycoon in Texas, Locke speculated that he might seek support from the former weather forecaster's family. He hadn't anticipated George Jr.'s potential for success. However, he hadn't anticipated George Jr.'s current thinking. Clearly, as a novice, George Jr. had merely expressed his idea without even a comprehensive business plan. Looking across at little George, Locke couldn't help but sigh. So you don't even have a complete business plan, and you want me to invest in your idea? My idea is very promising. Invest in me, and I'll open the shop. We'll split the profits, little George said. Do you need a business plan for something so simple? If you had money, and someone came up to you and said something like that, would you invest in them? Locke sighed. If I had money, I'd open my own shop, little George said. Clearly, little George had a sharp mind and a strong financial quotient, but he was still too young to grasp the complexities of the business without direct experience in management. Locke could only say, if you want me to share the money, you need to know where you plan to spend it, like the venue, the number of employees, their salaries, and your supply sources. Also, how will you meet customer needs? Are there any nearby competitors? What advantages do you have over them? You need to thoroughly research all of this in advance. And then you need to show me that you have the skills to run the store, manage your employees, defeat potential competitors, and generate a profit. If you don't consider this in advance, what if we lose money? You can just walk away, and I'll lose real money. Locke's words completely stumped George. Little George had never considered these issues before. Even Misty, who had joined George to join in the fun, was stunned. That's why many people need to go to school, because only university can teach them these specialized skills. Locke thought for a moment and said, but considering your situation, it's probably going to be difficult for you to get into a suitable university. So my advice to you is, if you want to start a tire business, find a job at a tire shop first. Observe and learn how they run their business, where they source their stock, how they market and promote their products, and what their customers' needs are, how you can best meet them, and keep them coming back for more. Once you've learned enough, then consider opening your own shop. Will you be willing to invest in George then, Miss? He asked. If the plan is feasible, Locke said. After all, we have a good relationship. Of course, you can also try to find other investors. That's a deal, Miss. He said with exceptional emotional intelligence. You must invest in us then, okay? Locke smiled, not paying attention to the subtle implications of Miss He's words. He didn't need the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and he had no particular preference for businesses like tires. Success would be great, but failure wouldn't matter. Maybe in the future, when little George sees his grandmother Connie become rich from her underground casino business, he will change his mind and let Connie invest. Chapter 117 Visiting Yaoang Manor. Back at the hotel, he found Tang Wei on the phone. From the conversation, Locke knew it was Jenny. I didn't expect you and Jenny to be even closer than I thought. After Tang Wei hung up, Locke smiled and said, honestly, I'm surprised you two can be friends. Who knows why she treats me differently? We have such different interests. Sometimes I feel like having her as a friend is worse than having a cat. Tang Wei sighed. She said she'd be spending Christmas in Los Angeles this year. She called me on the plane. She just made fun of the flight attendant's Texas accent. She even asked her to clean the blackheads off the phone to avoid making her uncomfortable. I thought the flight attendant was probably going to spit in her champagne. Thanks to Jenny, she's successfully shattered all my fantasies about being the daughter of a wealthy family. After spending so much time together, Tang Wei had grown accustomed to the fact that she had two completely different faces in formal settings and in private. She had previously found it hard to believe that the woman who presented herself as elegant, knowledgeable, and caring at cocktail parties could act like this to the service staff. Tang Wei had already learned how to interact with Jenny. He only listened to topics of interest and ignored complaints, sarcasm, and contempt. As they chatted, the hotel receptionist called to say a little girl was visiting. Knowing it was Peggy, Locke had a waiter bring her up. Because her parents were separated and determined to start a new life, they paid little attention to their daughter, Peggy. Within a few days, Peggy had become reluctant to stay home. It was clear that the little girl wasn't as indifferent as she pretended. After chatting with Peggy for a while, Deborah called to announce a party at the family estate. The Ying family was highly respected in Texas, after all, where they had their roots, and Texas was their home base. Hearing about Deborah's identity, Peggy expressed her desire to attend. Locke knew Peggy wasn't truly interested in the Ying family party, but simply didn't want to stay home any longer, but he agreed nonetheless. To show her appreciation for Locke, Deborah personally came to the hotel to pick him and the others up. The three of them climbed into the stretched Lincoln and the car started. Deborah opened a bottle of red wine from the car's mini barrel and poured it for Locke and Tang Wei, then poured a drink for Peggy. She spoke slowly. This is from my father's collection. He loved red wine and owned wineries in both France and Spain. Last year, he even bought an 80-year-old barrel, but it's completely undrinkable. I'm not really fond of red wine. I can't stand the bitter taste, Locke said with a smile. But I heard the Yaoang family's estate is huge, and I was thinking maybe we could go horseback hunting. Of course, if you're interested, you can stay a few days. I'll have the housekeeper arrange it, Deborah said. My grandfather loved hunting, and I've learned a lot since I was a kid. It's just that game is scarce this season. Peggy watched the two chat with a smile. If you knew her well, you could tell she was watching the show. Deborah didn't say that this was actually her first time hosting a party herself, and Locke was one of her most valued guests. In high society, networking relies on parties, and the size of the guests reflects the host's skill. The Yang family estate encompasses 75 buildings, 72 private roads, a small airport, a sculpture garden designed by top artists, and an art gallery housing a vast collection. It also boasts a dedicated playground, a golf course, and other amenities, as well as a private farm, a vast wild forest park, and several lakes. To maintain such a large estate, the Yang family members are serviced by a dedicated private guard, gardener, motorcade, and servants. Listening to Deborah's description, Locke felt like a self-sufficient, independent estate. In comparison, his own farm, while roughly the same size as the Yang estate, was vastly inferior in class. Deborah's introduction gave Locke more ideas for redesigning his farm. Perhaps he could discuss this with a professional designer after Christmas. Of course, Locke didn't intend to completely replicate the Yang family estate. For example, a sculpture garden or playground wouldn't be necessary. I could build a house of my choice, get a private airport, and eventually 2 private jets, and even a research laboratory of my own. I'd definitely give it some serious thought later. They passed quite a few luxury cars along the way. When the car stopped at the manor and everyone got out, Locke took a look and said, "Nice house." "It looks like a queen's palace." Glancing at Locke and seeing he was just being polite, Deborah said nothing. The house was indeed nice, but it couldn't compare to a palace. America still lags far behind Europe in terms of artistic heritage. However, the collection of antiques inside was truly eye-opening, and they were everywhere in this house alone. By that measure, the art from the treasure Locke had seized from beneath Holy Trinity Church might be worth a bit more than the entire Yang family's holdings, but it was still on the same level. After a brief tour, the group settled into the sofa to relax with tea. Locke said to Deborah, "I see quite a few guests arrived today. You don't have to take care of us so much, that's okay. Everyone except you is an old friend of mine, and they don't have your investment skills. My great-grandfather gave me $10 million, and I need a successful investment to prove my worth." After a few probing attempts, Deborah had guessed Locke had seen through her intentions and made no effort to hide them. This statement actually seemed more generous. Locke smiled. Deborah's approach didn't offend him. He had already considered this meeting before arriving. "So," he said, "I've got a little problem. If you can help me solve it, I'll invest $10 million for you. Don't ask where the investment is. The return will at least double in a year. Don't ask where the investment is." What investor do you think would accept such an offer? Locke had already given in, but Deborah refused, as his offer wasn't particularly generous. Not asking about the investment direction meant she couldn't know where her money went. It was like giving Locke money for nothing. "There's a big opportunity coming up within the year. I've been eyeing it for a long time, so I can't let the news get out, to avoid any accidents," Locke said. "Of course, to reassure you, we can sign a contract. If the returns don't double as I promised, I'm willing to make up the difference." Chapter 118 Trouble Others. After a moment's thought, Deborah picked up the teapot and poured herself a cup of tea. As she leaned forward, Locke caught a glimpse of white. "Let me start with this little problem," Deborah said, taking a sip of her tea. "I have a collection of antiques that I inherited with my estate. I'd like to use them as collateral for a loan, but the value of antiques fluctuates wildly, and the bank's valuation isn't what I expected. Besides the investment income from Sky Fund, Locke's private office now holds shares in several companies, generating substantial dividends annually. If these dividends aren't spent, the IRS will undoubtedly take a significant chunk out of them. Therefore, he's been collaborating with major brokerages and investment banks to acquire shares in companies of his choosing. High-tech companies like Microsoft and Intel account for nearly 50% of his holdings, owing to their relatively high returns. Furthermore, Locke focuses on investing in bank stocks, and due to information he learned in a past life, he has a strong preference for Wells Fargo. Originally a small California bank, through continuous mergers and acquisitions, it has grown into a national bank with a strong California focus. By this time, Wells Fargo had begun to show its potential. Locke knew it would experience rapid growth over the next decade or so. Many were optimistic about the bank, including Warren Buffett, the stock market magnate. Buffett had invested heavily in Wells Fargo several years prior and had become its largest private shareholder. Locke had approached him about acquiring his stake. Buffett was in the investment business, investing in Wells Fargo for profit, not for personal control like Locke did. If the price was right, he would certainly sell. After some negotiations, Locke gradually raised his offer from a 5% premium to an 8% premium, but the bank still refused to budge, insisting on a 12% premium. However, Locke's dividends were insufficient. Most of his remaining cash was tied up in Sky Fund and overseas accounts, invested in the next year's pound crisis, or more specifically, the European crisis. This necessitated a significant additional capital, and a bank loan was the most suitable option. The antiques he mentioned were part of the treasure trove beneath Trinity Church, carefully selected by Locke to avoid potential trouble. As for why he chose to mortgage the items instead of selling them outright, it was because the quantity was so large that the time to liquidate them was too long, and Locke had too many opportunities to seize. Besides Wells Fargo, there were many other companies he wanted to invest in, all of which needed capital. The Young family owned their own bank and held stakes in several other top banks, and Locke hoped to use Deborah to secure better loan terms. "You're not going to try to fool people with a bunch of fake antiques, are you?" Deborah looked at Locke with a half-smile. "Of course not," Locke emphasized. "I'm going to mortgage a large number of antiques. In that case, I can help you, but you have to double the return you promised," Deborah stated her terms. $10 million, turning it into $30 million in a year, that's not easy to meet, Locke said. "That's my price," Deborah said firmly. She needed a very successful investment to secure sufficient funds. Because of her status as a woman, Deborah wasn't initially considered a family heir. It was through years of hard work and calculation that she finally earned this opportunity. But she started out on a different footing than her peers. She received $10 million in seed funding, but the other 6 candidates, all men, received double that. Furthermore, the support she could secure from her family was incomparable. Despite the surge in the feminist movement years ago, patriarchy and patriarchal structures remain stubbornly strong. This is especially true in large families like the Young clan, as evidenced by the words she heard most often from her elders and even her mother. "No matter how much you lose, the family must remain intact. If your marriage breaks down, you either try to accept another man or become cynical. If you lose your child, you can't be happy." She wanted to control her own destiny, and the first step had to be a good one, even a spectacular one. That was why she chose to take some risks with Locke. At the same time, she would strive for a sufficient return. "Then it's a deal." After a moment's deliberation, Locke raised his teacup. "It's a deal." The two clinked their glasses, signaling a preliminary agreement. It was called a party, but it was more like a dinner. At 7 o'clock that evening, more than 30 people sat around a long table. Steaks, fruits, and vegetables, all grown on the estate, prepared by a dedicated chef, were served. Most of them knew each other, including children of prominent families and relatives of Deborah. Locke's fame had gradually spread throughout the American upper class, beyond the New York circle. His track record was impressive, and Sky Fund seemed quite successful. Tang Wei and Peggy had also benefited, receiving a ruby necklace and bracelet from Deborah's mother, rumored to have once belonged to a French princess. Unknowingly, Locke had become the center of attention at the dinner. Chatting with a group about financial investments, he wondered if he could land a few major clients. Quite a few had already expressed interest in investing, but getting them to actually commit required more work. After dinner, he invited a few interested investors to a game of poker, each contributing $50,000. It was a light entertainment, and no one paid much attention. Besides that, there were several games, like the popular blackjack and Texas Hold'em, with stakes even higher than their own. In the end, they successfully secured 2 investors, placing a total of $17 million in orders, which served as an exploratory investment. Tang Wei and Peggy accompanied one of Deborah's cousins to visit the sculpture garden. With so many family members, the estate hosted various parties almost daily, and those familiar with each other were already accustomed to helping each other with the guests. Seeing the Young family estate, Tang Wei, who had thought he had seen a lot with Locke, was truly enlightened. Peggy, on the other hand, was relatively calm, not acting like a little girl. They stayed until after 10 o'clock in the evening, when Locke finally succumbed to Deborah's enthusiasm and stayed the night at the estate with Tang Wei and Peggy. After Locke had finished with Tang Wei and was still full of energy, he was about to go to the bathroom to run some calisthenics and relax when he unexpectedly ran into Deborah. Needless to say, Tang Wei alone couldn't fully satisfy Locke, and Deborah didn't refuse, So the two of them went to Deborah's bedroom to watch the stars together. The next day, Locke enlisted Deborah's help again, successfully purchasing a 1.6% stake in Microsoft from someone else. Despite some issues, the two of them felt more like business partners, each knowing the other's deeply selfish nature. The evening's incident was merely a minor embellishment to their partnership. This kind of relationship wasn't bad, though. Strangely enough, a key way to maintain a relationship is to bother others. You help me, I help you, and over time, the relationship grows stronger. Chapter 119 Little Sheldon's Nightmare. After returning to New York after Christmas, Locke dismissed Skyfund's deputy financial officer and hired several new employees, most of whom were tasked with soliciting investments across the United States. The deputy financial officer was highly capable but also quite arrogant. Skyfund's success was growing, and they received generous year-end bonuses, but these pale in comparison to the bonuses and dividends Locke offered himself. Envious, he felt that if Locke, a teenager who hadn't even graduated from college, could achieve success, he believed he could do the same. He began privately soliciting clients and even tried to persuade Ms. Mora, a manager, to join him in establishing a fund company. The two met privately several times, and Ms. Mora expressed interest, but ultimately declined due to family reasons. However, the deputy financial officer persisted and attempted to instigate others to join him in the venture, a move Locke discovered. After being fired, he quickly found partners and began preparing to launch a company. Locke didn't seem to mind. There's no shortage of people who believe they're destined for the future. After the dismissal, he quickly promoted a suitable person. Wall Street was in no shortage of elites. Locke didn't bother to refute such a minor figure. Watching someone else do something is different from doing it yourself. After all, not everyone has a vision for the future. With Deborah's help, Locke secured a $410 million loan using some of the antiques from Trinity Church's treasure trove, along with shares in some of his own companies. With this money, Locke obtained an 8.6% stake in Wells Fargo from Buffett, and used the remainder to continue investing in promising companies. This loan pushed Locke's debt-to-asset ratio in the United States to an extremely high level. He had to carefully manage his assets in the United States, lest he run out of funds to pay the interest before the money from the British pound crisis arrived. By the time he finished these tasks, school was only a few days away, and he had to prepare for his trip to London. Having completed Dr. Gates' math problems, Locke, Peggy, and Young Sheldon all qualified to join Dr. Gates' team on an academic exchange trip to London and Cambridge University. The group consisted of 8 people, all sitting together. Locke didn't ask for anything special, like an upgrade from business class to first class. After over 10 hours on the plane, they arrived at London Heathrow Airport at 7 a.m. London time. They were quickly met by a Cambridge University receptionist, who escorted them to their reserved hotel. This academic exchange would last for the better part of a month, and since the group wasn't primarily comprised of Locke and his 2 companions, they would have more free time. He decided to take the opportunity to explore the UK, treating it as a kind of vacation. Since he was going to travel extensively, he naturally needed a car, and it couldn't be too bad. Buying a car wasn't something you'd find at a 4S dealership these days, but fortunately, such a trivial matter could be handled directly with a hotel, and many high-end hotels had their own channels. After making his arrangements, Locke retired to his room to rest and adjust to the jet lag. At noon, he and Peggy went to a restaurant. He ordered a Spanish seafood meal, but as for the legendary English dark cuisine, he simply gave it a miss. Just as he returned to his room, a hotel attendant knocked on the door. "Sir, there's a dealership selling the Aston Martin you're looking for. It's priced around £7,000 British. Would you like to check it out?" Locke nodded. "Please ask them if they'll accept a UBS check. I'd like to pay in US dollars based on the exchange rate." Several of his offshore companies overseas had some business done with UBS, and he had some spare cash in his personal account at UBS, more than enough for the car purchase. "That should be fine." Hearing it was a US dollar check from UBS, the attendant knew it wouldn't be a problem and immediately bowed and took his leave. About 40 minutes later, the hotel front desk called to say the dealership had arrived with a car. Locke arrived in the lobby and saw the salesman. He explained the car and offered to help with the paperwork, requiring only a small service fee. After trying the car out and feeling comfortable with it, he booked it on the spot. Cambridge University would be hosting a dinner that evening to welcome Dr. Gate and his delegation, but it was still early, so Locke simply browsed the hotel's travel guide and news of upcoming entertainment events. When Locke came across a promotional photo for a fashion show, he was taken aback. Isn't that Vanessa, the long-legged figure from the New York robbery? How did she end up in Europe modeling for a fashion show? He looked up the show's date, and a few days later, Locke contacted the hotel, requesting tickets. They said no problem. The event organizer and the hotel had collaborated, placing the show's promotion at the hotel to attract qualified customers. Within an hour, a waiter delivered the tickets, even in the VIP area. Locke wasn't particularly interested in events like fashion shows, but since he saw someone he knew, he wanted to find out if this person was Vanessa. Dr. Gate was a well-known figure in mathematics, otherwise, he wouldn't have been invited to Cambridge University for an academic exchange. The welcome dinner for Dr. Gate was a grand occasion. In addition to Cambridge University officials and professors, many high-ranking Londoners also attended. Due to the large attendance, the dinner was served as a buffet. The Cambridge University president gave a speech, then invited Dr. Gate to speak and introduce the team members. The dinner officially began. Locke was now quite familiar with this kind of dinner, and he effortlessly chatted with the guests, guiding Peggy along. Peggy's prodigy of her age attracted some curiosity, but thankfully, she was used to it and behaved appropriately around Locke. Unsurprisingly, Sheldon was the one who caused an upset. While chatting with a couple, he harshly mocked their doctorate in archaeology, earning him a black eye. Of course, the target of the attack wasn't the couple themselves, but their 12-year-old daughter, who, unable to tolerate Sheldon's rude remarks to her parents, punched him. When Locke heard the noise and rushed over, little Sheldon covered his eyes and stared at the girl across from him, his mind reeling from a time when he was 9 years old and in high school, being chased by a girl 3 years his junior. To avoid the neighborhood girl, little Sheldon had once tried to get the school bus driver to park closer to his house in exchange for helping him with his taxes. This would effectively reduce the chances of the girl, who often played nearby, spotting him and allowing him to hide inside more quickly. Unfortunately, the school bus driver was not very impressed by Sheldon, who kept nagging him that he should maintain discipline on the bus, and he rejected Sheldon's request on the grounds of school regulations. Therefore, every time Sheldon got off the bus, he had to carefully scout the surrounding environment, hiding like a thief, for fear of being blocked outside the house by the little girl who might appear. It can be said that the figure of the 6-year-old girl has always been a nightmare hidden deep in Sheldon's heart. At this moment, the figure of the little girl in his memory has overlapped with the figure of the girl who was still angry and glaring at him. Sheldon was so scared that he dared not breathe, and he no longer had the confidence to ridicule the archaeology doctor couple in front of him. When Locke rushed over, he saw this doctor couple persuading their daughter, Laura, using violence is not what a lady should do. You should apologize to the other party quickly. Chapter 120 Lord and Countess Crawford. The couple tried to persuade their daughter to apologize to Sheldon, but the little girl remained silent, staring at him with a fierce glare that frightened him to the point of pausing. Sheldon's mother, Mary, had learned that their baby, Shelley, was being bullied by a neighboring girl and insisted that her husband, George, talk to the girl's parents. George knew the complexities of bullying, and that it couldn't be resolved simply by talking to the parents, as he had been a school bully himself. Faced with his wife's insistence, George couldn't resist. He knocked on the door and explained the situation. The neighbor's face was filled with disbelief, unable to believe their adorable 6-year-old daughter would bully Sheldon. With the girl's denial, the matter was ultimately dropped. After all, from a common perspective, the bullying was only justified. The little girl quickly cornered Sheldon in the garage, frightening him so much that he injured his leg while trying to avoid her. Past nightmares reverberated with the present, and facing the girl's fierce gaze, Sheldon imagined himself being dismembered and thrown into the sea. He was so frightened he couldn't even utter a cry for help. He opened his mouth, but couldn't utter a single note. What happened? Locke finally came over, glancing at little Sheldon's damp pants and asking with a suppressed smile. Little Sheldon seemed to find his composure, quickly hiding behind Locke. While this guy bullied him regularly, it was still better than the girl who threatened to dismember him. I'm Richard Crawford, Laura's father. The girl's father shook Locke's hand. I'm so sorry, Laura was so rude. Lara Crawford turned out to be the future treasure-hunting goddess. Little Sheldon was lucky, only to have a black eye. If he had provoked her 10 years later, Laura might have shot a hole in his head. Locke Lee, nice to meet you. Locke shook her hand, noticing Laura looking at him, and smiled at her. It's okay. If it were little Sheldon, I'd understand. Why is her unreasonable behavior even forgiven? Little Sheldon finally spoke. Because every time someone hits you, there's a reason. Locke stared at him expressionlessly. Now you should go back to the hotel and change your pants. Little Sheldon only then realized the abnormality of his pants. He was too embarrassed to stay here any longer and had to leave quickly. Seeing little Sheldon's embarrassed escape, little Laura smiled. Thinking of Locke's words just now, her eyes softened when she looked at him. After little Sheldon left, the atmosphere quickly became lively again. The guests who had noticed this place also withdrew their gazes and continued to talk. Lord Crawford's profound historical research has truly opened my eyes, Locke complimented him. And your spirit of personal exploration is admirable. Perhaps this stems from my dedication to exploring the unknowns of history. My wife, Amelia, has also been a great help to me in this process. Richard smiled, embracing his wife's waist. I had no idea you were also deeply involved in medieval European history. I'm particularly interested in medieval history, especially the legends related to the Knights Templar. Locke knew that Amelia also held doctorates in archaeology and art. The couple's bond and enduring friendship stemmed from their shared interests. Knights Templar. At the mention of this, Richard Crawford's eyes narrowed slightly. Yes. I'm actually quite curious too. After thousands of years, has the Knights Templar survived? Locke said with a smile. I've been paying attention. Every once in a while, someone pops up claiming to be a descendant of the former Knights Templar, but they're always proven to be fake, Richard said. So I think the Knights Templar have mostly vanished into history. Even if someone claims to be a descendant of the Templars, it's probably just for publicity and fame. The Knights Templar have existed for nearly 1,000 years. During this long period, the order experienced both glory and darkness, nearly being wiped out by the Church during the French Union. Even those who fled to England to leave a retreat were forced to flee to the still untamed Americas. After recovering the treasure from Trinity Church, Locke also read the numerous parchment scrolls within. Besides historical records, they also recorded how the Templars, facing a critical situation in Britain, fled to America with the treasure as a retreat. Apparently, those who remained in America later sought independence for power, splitting from Britain. The parchment scrolls record the key members of the original Templars who arrived in America. Locke has researched their histories, and most have fallen into obscurity. However, a few families have successfully survived in America, becoming part of a small group that controls resources. However, this long history has also meant that these families are not entirely harmonious, with both conflict and collaboration occurring frequently. Looking back at American history, the disappearance of some of these families is a product of these conflicts. The treasure beneath Trinity Church has remained undiscovered for so long, and it's likely that clues to the treasure were lost during the conflict. As for the Templars in Britain, Locke speculates that they may have a strong connection to the Trinity Order from Tomb Raider. However, Locke doesn't know if the Crofts are also connected to the Trinity. Although Lara Croft frequently antagonizes the Trinity in the future, that doesn't mean the Crofts are unaware of the organization. It's even possible that they are members of the Trinity, otherwise why would so many of their close friends have ties to it? Seeing Laura and her husband's reactions, Locke thought of the parchment scroll and the palm-sized divine eye medal in the treasure. According to the description on the parchment scroll, it was something like a tiger talisman or jade seal from the ancient Eastern Kingdom, a token of power. Perhaps, in the future, he could pretend to be a descendant of the Knights Templar and rub shoulders with such ancient organizations. However, on second thought, this plan was quite risky. For example, if the divine eye medal wasn't recognized, even if he could command someone, it would likely be dangerous. Just explaining the origins of such a secret organization would be like watching a movie, and the audience would likely know they were villains. Trying to associate with such people would require a careful eye. A secret organization that had existed for thousands of years, who knew how powerful it was, and what it would think of a new member who suddenly appeared. While Europe advocated freedom and equality, in reality, bloodlines and family names were highly valued. If Locke suddenly appeared, he would likely be seen as someone seeking a share of the spoils, and the potential for targeting was high. Based on what we know so far, the Knights Templar also retains considerable influence in the United States, as evidenced by the FBI chief in the film National Treasure. The Knights Templar remaining in the UK are likely deeply integrated into the British aristocracy, deeply rooted within England and the nobility. The influence of the Holy Trinity can be seen in Tomb Raider. Therefore, It's best to play it safe for now, unless your power grows further and becomes less of a concern. At that point, you might be able to implement this idea and utilize the resources of these organizations. Chapter 121 Goodbye Electric Eyes and Long Legs. With these thoughts swirling in his mind, Locke discussed other historical and archaeological experiences with the Crawfords while contemplating his European expansion. As the saying goes, a cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. He had never intended to concentrate all his assets in the United States. Investments in Europe had long been part of his plan, with Britain being a key pivot point. Locke's current American roots were shallow. From a future perspective, making money in the financial markets remained his primary source of cash, both now and in the future. When he made $100 million, some would target him, but even more would seek to follow his lead. After all, compared to the overall market, $100 million was a small amount, barely even a sliver of the pie. Once he made $1 billion, hungry wolves would swarm, and maintaining his wealth would present challenges, though manageable. Just like Locke was currently cultivating connections in New York and Texas, attempting to achieve mutual benefit. But once profits reached tens or even hundreds of billions, the pressures he faced would intensify. Therefore, he divided his financial investments into several distinct sectors, creating the appearance of distinct factions. However, this wealth ultimately needed to be converted into industry and influence, and diversifying investments across different countries was inevitable. Locke has already decided on his investment targets. In the U.S., he's primarily targeting banking, high-tech, and media. Banking is about maintaining a more private funding channel, high-tech is the future, and media is about increasing his influence and making it harder for others to target him. As for his overseas investments, Locke plans to prioritize stable investments, following the lead of others by investing in infrastructure companies like water, electricity, and natural gas. These companies have stable annual revenues and asset growth. Of course, to ensure the future of these industries, the country must be stable and have considerable development potential. The UK is a good investment target. While there's talk of nationalization, the future of water, electricity, gas, and even oil will primarily be privatized. If he can control these sectors, he'll become the hidden, behind-the-scenes boss. European countries are just the right size. Unlike in the US, dominating a single industry requires massive capital. Furthermore, there's land, such as farms, ranches, and wineries. Land is the most basic, stable, and indispensable form of wealth. It may seem humble on the surface, but it can be very profitable when scaled up, though it lacks the glamorous appeal of some other industries. Just like tech giant Bill Gates. If it weren't for the news, no one would have predicted that the world's richest man, who had rapidly acquired immense wealth through technology, would become America's largest farmer a few decades later. This year's currency crisis, affecting the British pound and several other European countries, has given Locke a golden opportunity. Not only can he earn sufficient funds, but he can also capitalize on the crisis to acquire shares and properties at bargain prices that would normally be unavailable. Considering Europe's future importance, Locke is planning to purchase a property in London and has asked the Crawfords for help, aiming for a location in the First District. The heart of London lies near the First District. The day after the dinner, they visited Cambridge University and surrounding attractions. The following day, hosted by the Crawfords, he and Peggy visited the British Museum. Frankly, Locke isn't particularly interested in these ancient artifacts, but since he's investing in the UK, building connections is crucial. After dinner that day, Locke arrived at a fashion show in London. It's Vanessa, sure enough, but I'm missing the 3 long-legged women she worked with before. From the VIP seats at the fashion show, Locke watched the models parade down the runway. The one who caught his eye the most was the one walking before him. It wasn't just her looks and figure, but also the cold yet electrifying gaze she held as she walked down the runway. While the resemblance could be considered coincidental, that look made Locke realize the model before him was none other than Vanessa. He hadn't expected a convicted robber, a man who'd committed major crimes in New York, to have the audacity to strut down the runway at a London fashion show. Seeing someone familiar, Locke felt like catching up with her. Meanwhile, back in New York, America's sweetheart from the TV series Friends, Rachel Green, was getting married. Inside her room, bride-to-be Rachel was lost in thought as she listened to her parents discuss the wedding with her groom-to-be, Barry. For some reason, The excitement and joy of successfully getting engaged to the doctor she'd admired since childhood began to fade as the wedding approached, and Barry's flaws began to surface. Rachel's mind has been replaying some of her past daring ideas more and more frequently lately. Especially that regretful encounter from half a year ago. She and her best friends were having a blast in downtown New York City. It was at that bar, through divine guidance, that she met that handsome man. He now resurfaces in her dreams, along with a wild, uninhibited night they never had. It was divine guidance, under divine witness, that I met that handsome man. But her fake besties don't understand the anguish she faces as a bride-to-be, about to lose her freedom. If they hadn't ruined her dreamy night, perhaps she wouldn't be as sullen and resentful as she is now, her mind preoccupied with fantasies of being with that handsome man. Lately, she's been finding herself daydreaming, and those little bitches are pretending to ask what she's thinking about. What can she say? She's thinking about her wedding and her fiancé, Barry. They laugh pompously, mocking her and Barry's romantic love. But Rachel, knowing them well, knew they must know their true feelings. Perhaps they were still chuckling inwardly, wondering if they weren't satisfied with having the dentist husband we couldn't have, and still wanted the same freedom we have now? After the wedding arrangements were finalized, Barry returned home. Rachel was still thinking about that handsome man and her bachelor party, hoping to get him. It would be great if they could have a dance together and a wild night. With all those years on her mind, Rachel didn't pay much attention to her fiancé's departure, and didn't notice the glances between Barry and her maid of honor, Mindy. Barry had just returned home and was about to take off his coat when there was a knock on the door. As he opened it, Rachel's maid of honor, Mindy, rushed over. Mindy, Barry recognized her instantly. He didn't say anything, but his deft movements quickly earned the dentist's cooperation, and at that moment, the dentist's true nature was revealed. After all, he was a dentist with a well-paid, leisurely job. Even at his young age, he was troubled by his hairline and ordinary looks. But in America, money is justice, and after starting work, he gradually enjoyed the exciting life that only football players in their school days could experience. As Rachel's maid of honor and a close friend, Mindy's scheming far surpassed Rachel, who had relied on her looks and cheerleading uniforms to conquer the world since childhood. She recognized the dentist's righteousness and began flirting with him early on. Dentist Barry felt he was simply making a choice most men would make. Chapter 122 Don't be in a hurry. Vanessa, someone's looking for you. After the fashion show, Vanessa, who was removing her makeup backstage, heard a staff member calling her and handed her a note. She took it and glanced at it, her eyes narrowing slightly. Ignoring the staff member's curious and gossipy look, she threw the note into the trash can next to her. After a while, Vanessa, who had tidied herself, left the backstage and walked out onto the street. The moon hung in the night sky, casting a hazy glow. She looked around and soon noticed a figure standing next to her Porsche on the side of the road. Long time no see. I didn't expect you to be a model here, Locke greeted Vanessa with a smile as she approached. Without replying immediately, Vanessa gestured to Locke to open the car door, and the two of them got in. Starting the car, Locke continued, "Want to go to dinner together?" "No thanks," Vanessa shook her head. "Are you looking for me for money?" "If it was money, I would have taken it all," Locke said with a smile. "It's just that I suddenly saw an old friend and wanted to catch up." Vanessa didn't doubt that Locke wasn't after money. She didn't know the identity of the man beside her yet, but as he said, if it was money, he certainly had the opportunity to take it all. "Come to think of it, I didn't expect you to be a model." "Wasn't the money you got that time enough for you?" Locke asked casually. "I'm a contracted model, and what I did before was just a side job." Vanessa looked at Locke with a half smile. "Come to think of it, I don't even know what you do, financial investment, or what some people call a vampire. If you have any extra money, you can give it to me to manage. I guarantee a good return," Locke said. "Forget it. I'm afraid I'll lose everything." Vanessa shook her head and looked out the window. "I heard Dart was killed not long after that." The streets were bustling with traffic, and London's streets were bustling with activity. The nightlife was just beginning. As she had said, modeling was indeed her main job, but having grown up in the Brazilian slums, she had her own connections. She happened to have an opportunity to start a side hustle, so she took it and went to New York to make a living. But she hadn't expected Locke to actually have a legitimate career. She had assumed Locke was Dart's enemy or something, and she hadn't contacted him since then. "I don't know the details," But he was probably killed in a gang fight, Locke smiled. Of course, he had killed Dart after the incident to eliminate the hidden danger, but there was no need to say it. The car pulled up in front of a well-known London restaurant. Locke had already made a reservation. After ordering and handing the menu to the waiter, Locke looked at Vanessa and said, "I've always felt that modeling isn't suitable for a girl like you. I remember you're a pretty good driver. I have a job here, I wonder if you're interested. Are you planning on having me be your driver?" Vanessa said, half smiled at Locke. "A driver's income is way less than a model's, not a driver, but an instructor," Locke said. "I've opened a new security company in New York, and I'd like you to be the driving instructor for the bodyguards." "How did you become the owner of a security company?" Vanessa said, a look of suspicion on her face. "This world is not peaceful. The financial business is profitable, but if you make too much, there will naturally be many people who are jealous." Locke sighed. One must always learn to protect oneself. Vanessa felt that the man before her was not telling the truth, but knowing that he knew her background, she didn't refuse outright. Instead, she continued chatting with Locke, trying to test his abilities. She had made over $10 million in New York, and as the leader of the 4 long-legged women, she'd received the lion's share. With the money, she naturally wanted to enjoy herself, traveling and vacationing for 2 months. Only when she realized her money was flowing quickly did she resume her modeling career. But she hadn't expected to meet Locke in London so soon. From what he'd said, he was a wealthy man who wanted her to work for him. She suspected Locke was incredibly wealthy, otherwise he wouldn't have been so indifferent to over $10 million. After dinner, Vanessa walked out of the restaurant door. Noticing it was close to her hotel, she asked, "Have you researched me?" "Just some basic information." Noticing the chill of the night breeze, Locke took off his coat and draped it over Vanessa's shoulders. "After all, you need to have some understanding of your future employees, so I have no choice but to agree. Don't worry, I don't like to force anyone, but the offer I'll give you should be much better than continuing as a model," Locke said with a smile. "Think about it. I'll be in London for a few more days. Contact me when you're ready." They soon arrived at Vanessa's hotel. She took off her coat and gave it back to Locke, who gestured toward the hotel. "I'll take you upstairs." Vanessa didn't refuse and walked straight in. Locke accompanied her inside, to her floor, and invited him into her room. "Please sit down for a while. I need to change," Vanessa said. Sitting naturally on the sofa, Locke said, "You go ahead." Vanessa smiled, picked up her pajamas, and went into the bathroom. A moment later, she emerged, dressed in a bathrobe, her hair dripping wet, and sat down beside Locke. Taking a sip of Locke's brewed coffee, Vanessa said, "I've thought about it. I can promise you I'll be an instructor at your security company. I think you'd better put away that hidden gun." "That's the only way I'm sincere." Locke smiled and stood up from the sofa. "You should rest for a few days. I don't have anything special to do in London, so why don't we have some fun together? Let's not rush the instructor thing. I'm sure you'll agree sooner or later." With that, Locke opened the door and left the hotel room. Vanessa then pulled the gun from her chest, her expression changing as she stared at the door. Locke had naturally had his eye on Vanessa, but Vanessa was more wary of Locke at this point, so he wouldn't rush into anything. Over the next few days, Locke repeatedly invited Vanessa to explore London. The city is full of old buildings. Regardless of their interiors, just walking the streets gives it a unique feel. Most are built on private land, designed and constructed with durability in mind. Buildings dating back to the 17th and 18th centuries can be seen everywhere, creating a sense of history. A week later, Locke, armed with detailed intelligence from Vanessa's time in Brazil and further convinced of her trustworthiness, invited her to go house hunting. Since he was planning to invest in London, he naturally needed to choose a suitable place to settle down. Vanessa was surprised to see Locke accompanied by a little girl, about 11 or 12. It was Peggy, who had been unhappy with Locke's frequent solo outings, and insisted on accompanying him. The three of them first looked at villas along the Thames, but after a casual stroll, Locke became dissatisfied. His recent experiences had piqued his curiosity, and after seeing them, he felt the townhouses were a bit small. With canal boats passing daily, and a football field just 200 meters away, Locke felt the lack of privacy. Standing on the balcony on the 3rd floor of the villa, he could see countless people waiting to enter the stadium outside, and naturally he could also be seen from the opposite side. After seeing it, Locke did not continue to look at other riverside villas, but directly ordered to go to Kensington Gardens Street to have a look, forgetting these ordinary villas. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 123 Promise. Kensington Gardens, the street just east of Kensington Palace, will soon be known as the most expensive street in London, perhaps even the world. 2 properties are currently listed for sale, both with high asking prices, and its title as the most expensive street is already being confirmed. The real estate agent first led the 3 of them to one of the properties, which covers over 1,500 square meters. The building is a 4-story building, each over 260 square meters in size, with a swimming pool and a beautiful garden. Upon entering the house, Peggy smelled paint and casually asked, "Has it been renovated?" "Yes, the landlord commissioned us to tidy it up when he moved out. The floors are freshly waxed, and the windows are new." Locke looked around and frowned. "Something feels off about it. I don't like the decor, it feels a bit Indian." "Who owns this house?" "You have a good eye. The owner is a billionaire from India." Seeing that Locke seemed unimpressed with the house, the real estate agent continued, "If you're not satisfied with the decor, we can contact a best designer." "Don't worry," Locke waved. "Let's go look at the next house first." Due to historical reasons, India and the UK have frequent economic ties, and many wealthy Indians have large investments in the UK. Just like Rajesh in The Big Bang Theory, who chose Cambridge University for university. The surroundings are indeed much better than the riverside villas I've seen before. It's right next to Kensington Gardens, adjacent to Hyde Park, and not far from Buckingham Palace. Another house, not far away, was even larger, covering nearly 3,000 square meters. According to the real estate agent, the owner, a British aristocrat, had mortgaged the house to the Bank of England for investment. The investment failed, and the bank would have repossessed the house if it hadn't been sold. Otherwise, such a sought-after property wouldn't be sold unless absolutely necessary. The courtyard also had a swimming pool, flanked by a sunshade and lounge chairs, and several stone lions. The garden at the entrance was beautifully landscaped, shaded by trees, preventing views from the outside. Locke was pleased with the exterior layout and then went inside to tour the house. The decor was opulent, with the golden-grained camphor-wood floors and dark furniture creating a harmonious overall atmosphere. Seeing Locke's apparent satisfaction, the agent launched into a flurry of descriptions. There are 16 guest rooms, an indoor pool, a private cinema for 12, a separate gym, and a basement wine cellar of over 300 square meters. Eventually, Locke had the agent contact the owner, a British aristocrat in his 50s or 60s, meticulously dressed and holding the title of Viscount. The 2 parties sat on the leather sofa in the living room and began to negotiate. The other party offered 23 million British pounds. This price was actually on the high side, and Locke tried to negotiate, but after much negotiation, the other party only agreed to 2 million British pounds discount and refused to budge. The property here was in great demand, with buyers already offering 20 million British pounds. The old Viscount seemed to be sitting on the throne. In the end, the 2 parties settled on 21 million British pounds, which, at the current exchange rate, is over $37 million, not much different from the 3,600-acre farm Locke had purchased. Locke ultimately opted for a loan, with a 30% down payment and the remaining 10 years to pay off. The old Viscount had essentially emptied his family fortune to invest, mortgaging the family ranch and this house in a gamble. Unfortunately, his luck had failed, and the money had ultimately failed. Now, with this money, the old Viscount could pay off his debts from the failed investment and retire comfortably. The bank also benefited, having successfully recovered the loan it had given the old Viscount. If Locke defaulted on the mortgage, the house could still be repossessed, and the price might even be significantly higher by then. Locke hadn't anticipated being reborn as a mortgage slave again, but his funds were already used, and withdrawing them would cost him more than just the interest. He had no choice but to take out a loan. With the bank's cooperation, all the formalities were completed in 4 days, and Locke successfully became the owner of the property. After the handover, Locke moved in that very day to experience the property, bringing along Peggy and Vanessa. That evening, Locke personally cooked dinner for the 3 of them, and they shared it. Locke then said, "Peggy and I are returning to New York in 2 days. "Would you like to come with us?" Vanessa understood that Locke was trying to determine if she would agree to a job as an instructor at a security company. The price Locke offered was quite good, comparable to what she earned as a model. The problem was, she didn't really enjoy modeling, being treated like a commodity. It was just that, coming from a poor background, she wanted a better life, and modeling was the perfect path for her. Her driving skills and gun skills weren't surprising. Growing up in the slums, she'd likely have had some exposure to gangs, especially since she was so beautiful. Without any skills or tactics, she'd have been devoured without a trace. It was Dullet who initiated the New York bank robbery, and since she was struggling with money, the temptation was so great that she decided to take the risk. After her share of the money from her last successful operation, she'd already decided to quit. Although she'd spent a lot of it in the initial rush of wealth, the remaining sum would be enough for her to enjoy a stable life after her retirement as a model. Initially, she suspected Locke had ulterior motives, perhaps recruiting her into dangerous tasks. But after these days of interaction, Locke had successfully dispelled Vanessa's suspicions, as Locke was incredibly wealthy. Even if she robbed banks for Locke every day, the money she'd earn wouldn't be as much as Locke could easily earn. Locke also explained his security company, stating that they didn't normally engage in dangerous tasks, primarily protecting him and those around him. Because their targets were more likely to be women, the company had a higher proportion of female bodyguards. Vanessa was a keen racer and a skilled driver. Locke promised her a salary comparable to modeling, with ample benefits and a longer-term career than models who rely on their youth. After considering all the factors, Vanessa finally agreed to Locke's invitation. As for whether Vanessa would be targeted by the police in New York, Locke had already conducted preliminary research. In the original robbery, the police hadn't considered the four tall, muscular men as suspects, believing the robbers to be four tall men in suits. Even when the unlucky cop woke up and repeatedly claimed the four tall, muscular men were the robbers, Vanessa and her friends had already left. Without sufficient evidence, his claims were unconvincing. Furthermore, the lack of arrests in the robbery made the unlucky cop a pariah, leading to his dismissal. He has since left New York and taken up a position as a local sheriff. Therefore, Vanessa's trip to New York would be a safe bet. To celebrate, Locke opened a bottle of red wine, and before they knew it, they had both drunk quite a bit. Feeling they were sufficiently drunk, Locke walked Vanessa to the room she had chosen. Standing at the door, Locke looked Vanessa in the eye and slowly moved forward. Vanessa leaned half her body against the threshold, not avoiding him, but raising her head slightly in response. The two of them quickly embraced each other. Locke embraced Vanessa and entered the room, kicking the door, which slammed shut. Vanessa shed her coldness, revealing a passion that seemed to melt everything, giving Locke a very wonderful feeling. Chapter 124 Recovery and Contract. Looks like someone's captured a new bird. The next morning, Peggy and Locke sat at the dining table for breakfast. Vanessa, exhausted from a night of work until the early hours, was still asleep in her room, and Peggy learned what had happened. In response to Locke's scumbag behavior, Peggy developed her own theory about bird keeping. Locke liked beautiful birds and would capture them in nature. However, he respected the birds' nature. If they didn't like stability, he would give them freedom. If they were suitable, he would take them home and raise them in beautiful cages and provide them with abundant food. If these domesticated birds developed a hankering for nature over time, Locke would release them. There was no capture, he said. It's just that their temperaments were compatible, and everything happened naturally. Unaware of Peggy's private theory, Locke changed the subject. We're heading back to New York soon, so let's go out together today and get some gifts for our friends there. Does that include Balthazar, the owner of the antique shop? Peggy's sudden words startled Locke. You remember it? If it's about that antique shop where you made a deal with Balthazar and learned magic, then I do remember it, Peggy replied affirmatively. If I hadn't experienced it myself, I wouldn't have thought magic existed in this scientific world. No wonder all your books have something to do with it. Wait a minute, Locke hadn't expected this to happen, and his mind was a little confused. He had originally thought Balthazar had erased Peggy's memory, but Balthazar, worried about affecting Peggy's brain, had only temporarily sealed that memory. This wasn't a mistake. After all, memories from over 2 years ago would be quickly forgotten by most children. But as a gifted girl, Peggy, like young Sheldon, possessed the ability to see high-definition images. Just as young Sheldon could recall a barbecue recipe his grandmother had teased him with when he was 2, so too could Peggy. After the seal had worn off, Recall what happened in the antique shop. You're not trying to cast a spell to make me forget this, are you? Peggy said with a pitiful look. Magic involving memory is extremely dangerous. A single mistake could cause irreversible damage, so I won't use it on you. Locke frowned, looking at Peggy with a serious tone, but the existence of magicians has always been a secret. You must not reveal it, or it will cause great trouble. Of course I know. Peggy smiled brightly after hearing Locke's words. I'm not Sheldon, who can't keep a secret at all, but I'd rather this secret be ours. You want to learn magic too? Locke instantly understood Peggy's thoughts. I also want to experience the magical power of magic. It should be able to do many things that current science simply can't do. Peggy's eyes flashed with curiosity. Without an immediate response, Locke waved to Peggy. When she sat down beside him, he put his arm around her shoulders, looked down into her eyes, and said, I can promise to teach you magic, but you'll need to sign a contract with me. This is a binding soul contract that will constrain your behavior and prevent you from disobeying any of my commands. But if you only agree to keep it secret, then you only need to sign a magical confidentiality contract with me. Having spent so much time together, Locke still had some confidence in Peggy. But he also knew that people's hearts were fickle and the future was unpredictable. Unlike Vanessa or the Damons, who knew some of Locke's secrets, even if they were leaked, it wouldn't cause much trouble for Locke at the moment. With Locke's current connections and influence, they had no evidence other than his own testimony, and wouldn't have any influence. But if the news of Locke's possession of magic leaked out, it would be a different story. Especially since the magic power of a magician's apprentice is extremely special, capable of granting immortality. If this news spread, even Locke, with all his connections and influence, would be vulnerable to the covetousness of the upper echelons of society. This concerns Locke's core interests, so he won't tolerate any mishaps. Hearing Locke's words, Peggy's eyes flickered with thought. She'd considered Locke's reaction before the showdown, confident he wouldn't harm her. She was also deeply curious about the existence of magic, and wanted to witness it. She wasn't wrong. If it were just a matter of secrecy, Locke's demands were reasonable. But Peggy hadn't expected Locke to be so cautious about the spread of magic, demanding such a strict contract in order to learn it. Peggy had no doubt the contract Locke described would be effective. Once signed, her future fate would be under Locke's control. This caused Peggy to hesitate, and she thought of her parents and then looked at Locke. It didn't take long before she teased Locke with a smile. Should I call you teacher from now on? It's up to you. Locke exhaled, waved his hand, and a magical contract appeared before him. If you're determined, sign your name on it. Peggy carefully examined the contract, bit her lip, and finally signed her name. The next moment, the contract dissipated into the void. Peggy felt a new constraint on her mind. She smiled and said to Locke, then you can teach me magic now, right? Don't worry. Think it over carefully over the next 2 days. I'll give you 3 months. If you change your mind, I can cancel this contract and sign a new confidentiality agreement with you. After 3 months, if you're sure you won't change your mind, I'll start by teaching you the core meditation technique. Peggy pouted, feeling a little depressed, but she soon realized that Locke's actions truly valued her, and her joy returned. At this moment, she suddenly had a different understanding of the soul contract, believing it to be proof that she and Locke were soulmates. Locke hadn't known why Peggy had such a thought at that moment. He could only say that geniuses have their own quirks, their thoughts and actions different from those of ordinary people. Peggy had always been precocious, but she hadn't yet fully established her own values. Having just experienced a major family change, she developed some psychological problems. Children are very sensitive, and she unconsciously developed an unusual dependence on Locke, who always cared for her and understood her. Locke didn't deliberately engage in it, but the results were no different. It can only be said that it was an unintentional act. Chapter 125 Return to New York. A few days later, Locke and his group returned safely to Princeton University. Locke also took time off to take Vanessa to the security company, where he secured her a position and arranged an apartment for her. Then, Locke arrived at Monica's apartment, bearing gifts he had bought in England. Why? Locke opened the door with the gifts in hand, and upon seeing Locke, Monica burst into a barrage of whys, leaving Locke momentarily bewildered. What's wrong with her? Locke glanced at Phoebe, who was standing beside him. Are all men liars? Monica demanded bluntly. Which date cheated on you? Locke quickly understood. She got scammed, Phoebe explained. Monica had been dating a man, and while they hadn't planned on a quick date, The man claimed his ex had cheated on him and dumped him, and that he hadn't been able to do anything about it for a long time because of the green shadow. Hearing this, Monica's emotions took over, and the next thing happened naturally. The next day, while chatting with someone, Monica learned that the man had used the same method to deceive another female colleague, which made her extremely angry. Well, for that little thing, many men would lie, Locke shrugged. After all, not every man has the same advantages as me. You have to learn to reject beautiful girls who throw themselves at you, huh? Monica rolled her eyes at Locke. Monica, what are you yelling about? You're keeping me awake. As they were talking, a bedroom door opened and a blonde girl emerged. OMG, Rachel couldn't help but exclaim at the sight of Locke. She didn't believe in God, but upon seeing Locke, she recalled the guidance she had once given her, and couldn't help but exclaim. Locke, this is my friend Rachel. Monica shrugged and introduced herself. Hi, Rachel waved to Locke, tossed her hair, and smiled. Nice to meet you. Rachel ran away from her marriage 2 days ago and is now my roommate. Seeing Rachel's expression, Monica unceremoniously punctured her tire. Monica, Rachel couldn't help but exclaim. Nice to meet you. Seeing all the old friends present, Locke smiled and said, I didn't expect to have a new friend here. If I'd known I was in London, I would have packed an extra gift. Are Chandler and the others here? They were just across the street. Monica called Chandler and Joey over, and Locke gave them their gifts and chatted for a while about London. The whole time, Rachel sat next to Locke, laughing at something funny and even placing her hand on Locke's leg. It's easy to say that American girls take the initiative. Rachel, having finally met the handsome man she'd been blessed with, was so excited that she didn't care about her reserve. Moments later, Ross pushed the door open and walked in. His smile suddenly darkened as he caught sight of Rachel's actions. Rachel had always been his goddess. He'd thought it was hopeless when Monica told him she was engaged, but fate had favored him. After he and Carol signed the divorce papers, he hadn't gotten over it, until that day in the cafe, when he just said he didn't want to be single and saw Rachel, dressed as a bride, running up to him. Ross had always thought this was a sign that his dream was about to come true, and he'd been so excited he'd barely slept. But he hadn't expected what he'd see just a few days later. Hey, Ross, you're here. Locke turned around and saw Ross's scowl. He immediately understood why and said with a smile. I just got back from London. This is a gift for you. Ross didn't reply, but sat down across from Locke, his eyes still fixed on Rachel's hand on Locke. Monica quickly noticed something was wrong. She knew what her brother was thinking and quickly said, So, Locke, you said you saw a fashion show in London. Yes, the dress I brought you is the one I saw at the show. You're sure you'll like it? Locke said with a smile. You're not going on an academic exchange. From what you're saying, it sounds like you're on vacation, Phoebe asked. Dr. Gade and his team were mainly responsible for the exchange there. My qualifications were a bit lacking, and the work assigned to me was very simple, so I had more free time. However, I did play a little game in Cambridge. What little game? Chandler asked. It's a little math game, and the prize money is about £30,000, a very small one. £30,000, I only make that much in a year. Chandler said, Is it still a little game? It's actually a level-breaking game organized by an alumnus of Cambridge University. It's circulated in the mathematics department. There are 3 levels in total, each one is a math problem. Whoever solves them all first wins the prize. It's very common in the mathematics community. Do you often play games like this? When it comes to money, everyone is interested. Of course, this kind of game isn't uncommon. Our school has held it before, and there are games with even higher prizes. As far as I know, Dr. Gates from our school won $1 million for completing a level-breaking game 2 years ago. $1 million? Who's so generous? Rachel was now intrigued. Do mathematicians make money like this? There are many organizers, various mathematical research and application laboratories, or some anonymous organizers. Locke thought for a moment and said, The amounts vary. Last year, Peggy held a similar event, and the prize was not bad, $500,000. $500,000 is not bad. Ross couldn't help but ask, if there's such an event, can I participate? This kind of game is generally only for people in mathematics, Locke said implicitly. I'm also good at math, Ross emphasized unwillingly. Then let me give you an example. It's a problem from the UK. The first problem, the group had been excited, but after Locke's words, they all looked at each other in confusion. None of them had even heard of the mathematical formulas Locke was talking about, let alone putting them together. They were all completely bewildered. Everyone turned to Ross. After all, he'd always claimed to be a genius and the only one of them with a PhD. Ross, unwilling to embarrass himself in front of his goddess, naturally didn't dare admit he didn't understand the question. He could only perfunctorily say, "I'm still thinking. This kind of problem isn't something you can solve overnight, okay? This isn't something we can get involved in," Monica said. "Locke, Rachel's looking for a job soon. Do you have any recommendations?" Looking for a job, Locke glanced at Rachel, remembering how, in the original show, Rachel worked as a waitress for a while before finding success at a fashion company. "Rachel, do you know anything about the luxury goods industry?" "Of course. No one knows fashion better than me." The mention of luxury goods perked up Rachel. She'd cut up the credit card her father had given her at the instigation of Monica and the others, and she soon regretted it. With her surgeon father's care, she had lived a wonderful life since childhood. The thought of being separated from all that made her regretful. She hadn't been having any luck finding a job in the last few days. She had originally considered accepting a waitressing position at the cafe downstairs, but unexpectedly, Locke's help provided a new opportunity. "A friend of mine has a company in New York that deals with fashion. I'll call and ask." With that, Locke called Fallon Carrington. The details of the AOL deal, which had been exchanged with Mr. Carrington, were discussed with his daughter, Fallon Carrington. The two had met several times since then, and Locke knew that Fallon Carrington had invested in a luxury brand company, so arranging a regular position for her shouldn't be a problem. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.